enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. I am Vivian Su, the daughter of the capital's renowned Grand Tutor Thomas Shu. During the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet, I saved Princess Hannah just as she was about to fall into the lake. The Empress Dowager, seeing my gentle nature, benevolence, and combination of talent and beauty, issued a royal decree for me to marry Harrison Chen, the Prince of the Northern Borders, who was famous throughout the imperial court. Upon hearing the news, my face turned pale, and I nearly collapsed. I hurriedly knelt down and pleaded, claiming that I, Vivian, was untalented and unlearned, truly unworthy of the Prince of the Northern Borders. I begged the Empress Dowager to retract the royal decree. Everyone knew that within the Chen estate, there was already a woman he had brought back from the battlefield. He had once sworn that in this lifetime, he would never take a wife or concubines, wishing only to live out his days with her. Knowing this, I stole a glance at him. As expected, his expression was gloomy and as dark as ink. Afterward, my father and mother were so worried about me that they could not sleep well for half a month, and deep wrinkles appeared on their faces. All of my parents' letters requesting to annul the engagement were rejected by the emperor. As for Harrison Chen, the person I thought would make a move to cancel the marriage, he remained silent without saying a word. On the day of the grand wedding, just as the ritual of bowing to heaven and earth began, a maid rushed in from the outside in a panic. She stumbled and fell to the ground, her cries echoing in my ears. My lord, please come quickly to see concubine Lucy. We heard she suddenly fell critically ill and cannot hold on much longer." Harrison Chen's face changed dramatically. He immediately let go of the red silk in his hand. To the shock of all the guests, he turned and left without a shred of hesitation. He abandoned me there, alone at the wedding ceremony under the layer of the red veil. I watched his figure in the bright red groom's robes, moving further and further away. The red silk in my hand gradually turned ice cold. The groom had gone, so what meaning did this ceremony hold anymore? I forcefully pulled down the head covering, making everyone think I would leave in anger. However, I only smiled softly and calmly. Facing the astonished gazes of the guests, I continued to welcome them in my capacity as the princess consort of the Northern Borders. The Empress Dowager had ordered the marriage, and the emperor supported it. The union between myself and Harrison was not merely a marriage alliance, but an unbreakable political relationship. My father was helpless in this situation. The people present were intelligent. No one was foolish enough to offend the Prince of the Northern Borders, or the imperial court. They had to overlook this incident and filed into the hall to attend the banquet. Only my older brother, Arthur Shu, could not bear the anger. He intended to speak up and demand justice for me, but I hurriedly grabbed his hand. "Brother, do not do that. It is fine. If he behaves like this on the day of the grand wedding, then he and I were never meant to be a normal husband and wife, let alone have deep affection." Before marrying into this family, I had already prepared myself mentally. Couples live together for a lifetime, but how often is it due to love? Simply respecting each other is also a way to live together. Furthermore, his actions today were not only a slap to my face, but also a humiliation to the emperor and the Empress Dowager. There is no need for you to intervene. The emperor and Empress Dowager will naturally have their own way of handling it. Arthur gritted his teeth and sighed, looking at me with pity. "Vivi, for you to endure this is truly too aggrieved." I sighed softly, shook my head, and said nothing more. Later, I heard the maids report that my father and brother displayed a cold attitude toward Harrison for the rest of the day. He also knew he was in the wrong, so he silently accepted their anger without a word of protest. By nightfall, he finally entered the bridal chamber. I had ordered the cancellation of all traditional rituals, such as eating the dumplings for offspring, drinking the nuptial wine, and unveiling the bride. Even the celebratory items on the bed, like lotus seeds, longans, and peanuts, had been cleared away. The red candles burned high in the room, flickering with light, but in his cold eyes, all joy seemed out of place. I sat before the mirror, letting my personal maid, Amber, help me remove my jewelry. When I heard a noise, I turned and asked, "My lord, is concubine Lucy all right?" He sat down at the table. The candlelight cast shadows on his face, revealing a mix of ambiguity and guilt. He remained silent for a moment before replying. "Sonia has been frail since childhood. What happened today was not intentional on my part. It is just that a few days ago, the cold wind in the courtyard weakened her body, and her maid worried too much, leading to this situation. This prince apologizes to you on her behalf. Today truly caused you to suffer a grievance. I suppressed my smile, looked straight into his face, and spoke. My lord, I dare not accept your apology. Both you and I know clearly that this marriage is only due to the grace of the emperor and the empress dowager. We could not refuse it. I know you already have someone in your heart, and I have no intention of competing with her. However, since things have come to this, from now on, I will fulfill the responsibilities of a lawful wife and manage the household affairs thoroughly. As for other matters, I ask for nothing more. I only hope to live peacefully in the estate and hope you will grant me that. Matters that are not voluntary to begin with, why must we act all day? Pretending only makes us more tired. I thought this straightforwardness would suit Harrison's personality. Sure enough, his brows relaxed slightly. He looked at me under the flickering red candlelight. After a long while, he spoke heavily. This prince will give you enough dignity. I bowed my head in thanks. I sincerely thank you, my lord. Saying nothing more, I signaled for Amber to continue removing the hairpins. Wearing the phoenix crown all day was truly uncomfortable, my neck was incredibly sore. As for Harrison, he reeked of alcohol. He sat for a while and then went into the bathroom. When he returned, with steam still clinging to his body, I had already dismissed everyone. I held a copy of Travel Notes from the Mountains, and leaned against the headboard to read. I did not possess the slightest shyness of a new bride facing her husband. Harrison was likely exhausted. He only glanced at me a few times before climbing onto the bed himself and pulling the quilt over his body. This bed, carved with patterns of fluttering butterflies, was a gift my mother had specially commissioned from Master Su, a famous craftsman in the Jiangnan region. It took a year and a half to craft, starting when I was still young. Not only was it exquisite, but it was also incredibly spacious, large enough for two people to lie down comfortably. Although Harrison was a large man, there was still a wide space left for me. After he lay down, the night was already late. I closed the book, stepped out of bed, and blew out the pair of dragon and phoenix candles on the table. Seeing this, he asked in surprise, "What are you doing?" According to the capital's customs, the dragon and phoenix candles on the wedding night must burn until dawn, symbolizing the long, lasting love of the couple. But for us, that was entirely superfluous. I slowly climbed back onto the bed, pulled the blanket over myself, and replied softly, "I cannot sleep with the light on." I shifted inward, leaving a large distance between us. Although it was the wedding night, both of us seemed to have reached a tacit agreement. Harrison would not touch me. I had anticipated this before marrying into the estate, so now I felt quite relieved. Even so, I stared at the red silk hanging at the head of the bed, and a touch of sadness inevitably rose in my heart. After all, what girl does not dream of getting married, which is like being reborn a second time? I had once secretly imagined what my husband would be like. Would he be tall or short, thin or fat, decisive or gentle and scholarly? I wondered if my future husband would be like my sister and brother-in-law, loving yet arguing noisily but still happy, or if he would be like my parents, deeply loving and respecting each other, their bond tight for a lifetime. But now, all questions had their answers. My husband was accomplished in both civil and martial arts, but regrettably, his heart had long belonged to another. Competing for the love of someone who does not love you is the most foolish thing in the world. People's hearts are always biased, no matter how much you do. In their eyes, you are just a nuisance. I only prayed for one thing: I did not need love, I only needed to keep my dignity. In the darkness, I closed my eyes and tried to force myself to sleep, but tears silently fell. Not long after, a violent knocking sounded at the door, accompanied by the sound of a heated argument. I frowned and asked loudly, "Amber, what is the matter?" Amber's voice was filled with both anger and worry. Nanny Zhao from the fragrant courtyard suddenly barged in, saying that concubine Lucy is unwell, and insisting on inviting the prince over immediately. Hearing this, Harrison immediately turned over and prepared to get out of bed. "This prince will go see how she is." Just as he lifted his leg, I grabbed his arm firmly. "I know you cherish concubine Lucy, but today in front of so many people, you have already caused me to lose face. In the future I will not control where you go, but tonight, I beg you to stay. I am also from a prestigious family, loved and cared for by my parents and brother since childhood. I hope you will preserve some dignity for me and for both our families." I looked straight into his eyes, my hand gripping his arm tightly, feeling his muscles tense under the red silk robe, refusing to yield. Every word I spoke was clear and distinct. My lord, you just said you would give me dignity. Let me handle these matters. You just rest first. Without waiting for his reply, I quickly stood up, lit the lamp, and took the gold-embroidered wedding coat I had just taken off, draping it over my shoulders. I did this intentionally to remind him that this was still our wedding night. Harrison Chen said nothing more and silently sat back on the bed. I opened the door and stepped out. The loud noise outside caused everyone to freeze in surprise. No one expected the person walking out to be me, not the prince. Nanny Zhao, the one causing the commotion, suddenly fell silent, looking as if she had been frightened. Madam, I swept my gaze around the crowd outside, pausing for a few seconds on Nanny Zhao and her maids, then issued a cold order. Amber, take my calling card and go invite a physician to examine concubine Lucy. Aside from that, punish Nanny Zhao and those causing a disturbance in the middle of the night with 30 lashes, then lock them in the warehouse. We will deal with them tomorrow morning. Amber happily accepted the order and was about to act immediately, but an old woman standing nearby hesitated and said, Madam, today is the wedding day. If blood is spilled, fear it is bad luck. I laughed coldly. So you all know this is the wedding night of the prince and myself. Yet you dare to let an old hag who knows no rules cause chaos outside. I did not know the Chen estate had such strange rules. Get out! I shouted, my anger erupting. Everyone immediately scrambled into motion as soon as they saw my temper flare. Before being dragged away, Nanny Zhao, unwilling to give up, called out, My lord, my lord. It seemed Harrison was tired of this scene. His cold voice rang out from the room. Shut her mouth. As soon as the words were spoken, someone quickly gagged Nanny Zhao and dragged her away. In this world, there is no wall that can hide all secrets. The next morning, news of the incident on the wedding night of Harrison and me had spread throughout the capital. From a person everyone admired as the daughter of the Grand Tutor, I had become a laughingstock for the entire city. The Emperor and the Empress Dowager in the palace heard the news and summoned Harrison into the palace to reprimand him severely. The Empress Dowager and the Empress even carefully sent their most trusted maids to bring many rewards to comfort me, while simultaneously implicitly warning concubine Lucy. Afterward, I led Amber to visit her. Concubine Lucy had always been frail, a gust of wind could make her sick. She was Harrison's treasure, easily hurt by nothing. I smirked faintly. As I reached the door, I saw her sobbing, nestling into Harrison's embrace, seeking comfort. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, large drops falling continuously, looking truly pitiful. My lord, please believe me. I did not mean to ruin the wedding ceremony of you and the princess consort. It is all because my body is too weak. Nanny Zhao and Holly were only worried about me. She spoke while coughing weakly a few times. Harrison gently patted her back, his expression full of tenderness. The story of concubine Lucy's weak body was no secret in the capital. It was said that years ago on the battlefield, she had saved Harrison's life and fell ill because of it. No one knew the specifics, but because of that, Harrison always gave her boundless love. Who could compare to love forged in life and death? I had no intention of competing. Amber, following behind me, could not stand it anymore and gave a soft cough to remind them. Only then did the two of them realize my presence. Concubine Lucy looked up, giving a faint smile full of frailty and ingratiation. Princess consort. She spoke, trying to lift herself to get out of bed and bow. But halfway through, she fell back into Harrison's arms. Seeing this, I did not bother to check if she was truly sick or just acting. I spoke gently. Sister, if your body is unwell, just rest. Do not force yourself. Concubine Lucy immediately spoke with a remorseful look. It is because I am useless. Today, I was supposed to come to the main courtyard to serve tea to the princess consort. I did not expect to cause you to worry and come visit me. It is truly blameworthy. Yesterday, I even troubled the prince and the princess consort all day. It is truly a sin. I smiled and replied, Sister, you are being too polite. It was all caused by those ignorant maids and nannies. You do not need to worry about them. Keeping your health is what matters. Has the physician come to see you? What did they say? I smiled pleasantly, accepting her humility, but I was also genuinely curious about her earnestness. Harrison answered for her. It is still the old heart condition. She cannot withstand wind or anger. Fortunately, thanks to my care over the years, she has managed to survive. You do not need to worry too much, just let her rest more. Although his words were soft, I clearly understood the implication behind them. She could not endure anything, so I should not use the status of princess consort to force her to follow the rules. A concubine like her had to come to the main courtyard every day to serve the main wife. But if her illness was truly that bad, and something happened, wouldn't the responsibility fall on my head? I laughed softly in my heart. I did not want to see her every day either. I had no interest in Harrison and only wanted to live peacefully in my own courtyard. Therefore, I spoke with an air of generosity. Hearing you say that makes my heart ache. If your body is unwell, from now on, you do not need to come to the main courtyard to serve. Just rest peacefully. My tolerance clearly satisfied Harrison. After chatting for a while, a bowl of hot medicine was brought in. The maids surrounded concubine Lucy, helping her drink the medicine and rest. I left the room with Harrison. Halfway out, he suddenly spoke. Sonia's health is not good. In the future, I fear I will have to trouble the princess consort to take care of her more. I was momentarily stunned, then suddenly realized his intention. He planned to push the burden of caring for concubine Lucy onto me. I had said so many words just now solely to push this burden away from myself. After all, caring for her well would not guarantee a reward, but if I cared for her poorly, I would certainly face dissatisfaction. Did he think that because I showed tolerance, he could walk all over me? I suppressed my anger, looked straight into his eyes and spoke coldly. My lord, what is there to be troubled about? Before I entered the estate, the servants took very good care of her. Concubine Lucy had plenty of food and clothing, lacking nothing. Compared to me, surely the housekeeper and the nannies in the estate are more dedicated to caring for patients. To be honest with you, my lord, my health is not very good either. If you wish, you can wait until the day we visit my home to ask my mother. Speaking of this, I remembered my mother. She was already sorrowful because of my marriage to Harrison, and after hearing about yesterday's events, she had fallen even more ill. Mentioning this left him speechless. He seemed to realize he was in the wrong. This prince did not mean that. Now that you have entered the estate, all matters in the rear courtyard will be handed over to you to manage. Sonia's body is weak, and inevitably there will be many troublesome matters in the future. I fear it will disturb you greatly. As for the matter of your mother, on the day we visit your home, I, Harrison, will personally apologize. Yesterday truly caused you to suffer a grievance. I replied, my voice maintaining its calmness. There is nothing troublesome about it. Just let the servants take care of it. My lord, rest assured I am not a suspicious or jealous person. However concubine Lucy was cared for before, she will continue to be cared for that way. Perhaps he noticed the coldness in my words, so he stood looking at me for a long while. This prince understands your generosity. I entrust the remaining matters to you. After speaking, he clasped his hands in front of his chest and bowed calmly to me. My heart trembled slightly. Harrison, who commanded 3 armies and was exempted from bowing even before the emperor, was now bowing his head to me. At this moment, I did not know whether to marvel at his deep affection or envy concubine Lucy's luck. I only knew one thing for sure: I was the only sacrifice in this marriage. Perhaps I was a sinner in my past life to have fallen into this ironic situation now. I suppressed the bitterness in my heart, avoided his gaze, and turned my head away to hide the tears that were about to fall. Although my voice remained calm, I spoke. My lord, you are too polite. It is late, and I still have many matters in the estate to attend to. I will not see you off. Please take care on your way. Take care on your way, my lord. After saying that, I did not wait for his answer and immediately led Amber away. Amber supported my arm, looking at me with worry, and said, Madame. I gently wiped away the tear at the corner of my eye, smiled and comforted her. I am fine. Even though there is no affection, at least Harrison is still someone one can reason with. The days ahead will probably not be too difficult. 3 days later, on the day of the traditional home visit, my mother hugged me and wept bitterly. As for Harrison, he truly kept his promise and gave me enough dignity by directly apologizing in front of everyone. Although my father and mother did not like this marriage, thinking about the fact that I had already married into the prince's estate, and that all my future honor and disgrace were tied to him, they dared not blame him too much. The meal on the home visit day was not exactly joyful, but it was not too heavy either. Before I left, my mother pulled me aside and asked, "Are you and the prince getting along?" Looking at my mother's expectant eyes, I could not bear to disappoint her, so I tried to act shy and nodded slightly. Seeing the relief on my mother's face, as if a burden had been lifted, my heart ached. When I walked outside, I saw my father talking to Harrison Chen. Vivi has been spoiled since childhood, so her temperament is somewhat stubborn. In the future, if there are times when she is unreasonable, I hope the prince will not blame her but forgive her. I thank the prince in advance. After speaking, my father bowed deeply to Harrison. That scene made my throat choke up, and tears I could not stop silently flowed down. The man bowing before Harrison was my father, the grand tutor to the crown prince. Years ago, when the late emperor insisted on imposing 7 severe punishments, my father led the court officials to kneel before the Taiji gate, enduring many floggings, yet he did not yield. Yet now for my sake my father had to humble himself. I covered my mouth trying to suppress my sobs. Harrison also seemed surprised. He hurriedly stepped forward to support my father and said, "Father-in-law, please do not do this. Please stand up." My father's voice was earnest. "I know the prince has someone in his heart. I do not ask you to love my daughter, I only ask that you treat her well." The words, filled with a father's love, made my heart ache even more. Harrison fell silent, a complicated look flashing in his eyes. "Father-in-law, rest assured, Vivi is already my wife. I will treat her well." My father smiled gently. That was the most sincere smile I saw that day. When I walked out, my tears had already dried. After giving a few instructions, my father personally saw me to the door. As the carriage moved away, I could not help but lift the curtain to look back at my father's aging figure, still standing there, watching the carriage for a long time. My heart was bitter. I let the curtain fall, disregarding the fact that Harrison was still sitting in the carriage, and lowered my head, crying loudly. I could not suppress my sobs. Harrison Chen raised his hand as if to comfort me, but then lowered it again, saying nothing. The resentment in my heart flared up. I looked up with red eyes and questioned him in a low voice. "You do not love me. Why did you marry me?" Only heaven knew that in the time before the wedding, I had hoped so much that he would take some action. Harrison closed his eyes and sighed softly. "I am sorry. That is all. It is done." I looked at him and could not say anything more. When the carriage arrived at the Chen estate, I got out and saw concubine Lucy already waiting at the door with her maid, Holly. When she saw us walking together, concubine Lucy immediately approached. Her eyes were glued to Harrison. "My lord, princess consort, didn't you just recover? Why are you out like this?" Harrison stepped forward to support her arm. My heart was filled with resentment. I had no interest in dealing with her arrogance, so I simply said, "There are still many matters in the estate that need to be handled. I will not disturb you anymore." Then I turned and led Amber away. Behind me, concubine Lucy's weak voice rang out. "What is wrong with elder sister?" Harrison replied, "It is nothing. The princess consort just misses her home." The days in the prince's estate were many times busier than when I was a young lady at home. As the mistress managing the Chen estate, the first thing I had to do was examine the estate's account books. Harrison had joined the army at the age of 12 and spent 13 years fighting in wars, deeply favored by the emperor. He had plenty of assets, from gold and silver to farmlands. However, he used most of it to provide for the families of soldiers who had sacrificed their lives. Added to this was the fact that the frail concubine Lucy spent lavishly within the estate, making the financial situation not very abundant. When I looked through the account books in the prince's estate, seeing that the income and expenses barely maintained a balance each month, I could not help but ponder. Concubine Lucy's expenses were truly excessive. Every month, the cost of tonics amounted to over 500 taels of silver, while a middle-class family spent only about 10 taels of silver a year. Not to mention that there were 20 servants serving her exclusively, including a private chef. I had visited the residences of many noble officials, but concubine Lucy's extravagance was truly outrageous. Fortunately, she was the only one in the prince's estate, and Harrison also did not favor a luxurious lifestyle, so the current situation could be maintained. Amber, who had followed me since childhood, looked at the account books and could not help but exclaim in surprise, "How precious is she that she costs so much silver every month?" Standing nearby, the steward looked troubled and awkward, looking at me and waiting for a decision. I rubbed my forehead, listening to the steward's explanation. In reality, the steward was not without opinions about concubine Lucy's extravagance. He just dared not speak out for fear of offending the prince. "Madam, the double Ninth festival is approaching. Gifts for other estates also need to be prepared." I replied gently, "Then just do it according to custom." The steward looked troubled again. "What is wrong?" I took a sip of tea and asked, "Madam, the funds in the estate are exhausted." "Exhausted? There are still 3,000 taels of silver in the account books. But the revenue from the farmlands and shops will not arrive until next month. This amount must be used for the estate's expenses for the next 2 months, especially concubine Lucy's portion. I fear it is not enough." Amber could not help but ask, "So where has this money been spent?" The betrothal gifts and organizing the wedding also cost a considerable amount. The steward answered vaguely, making me unable to help but laugh. Does the steward think I spent too much? I dare not. This old servant dares not. It is just the truth that the funds in the estate are exhausted. The steward sighed, his face full of difficulty. I frowned, not wanting to blame the steward because his words were not wrong. This problem was not difficult to solve. I just needed to take money from my dowry. My mother had prepared my dowry since I was very young. When she knew I would marry into the prince's estate, my father added to this dowry, enough for me to live on for a lifetime. But thinking about using my own dowry to pay for concubine Lucy, I felt unwilling, nor could I bring myself to do it. However, this was the first important issue I had to resolve since entering the prince's estate, so I could not ignore it. I pondered for a while, then called Amber and gently ordered, "Go get the list of betrothal gifts for me to see." Hearing the order, Amber responded softly, turned into the room, and brought the list of betrothal gifts to me. I meticulously examined each item. After looking carefully, I said, "If these things are from the prince's estate, then let them be used for the prince's estate. If they are used up, then I will not worry anymore." Facing the steward's questioning gaze, I did not scold him, only silently left the room. The next day, I told Amber to bring a sum of money over. Thanks to that, the prince's estate's account books were supplemented, and the expenses became sufficient again. Time passed like that for 2 years. I also gradually got used to life at the prince's estate, quiet and peaceful. Harrison kept his promise to concubine Lucy. From the day of the wedding until now, he had never spent the night in my room. He only occasionally stopped by to eat and talk. He was knowledgeable, and I was equally intelligent. If we ignored the forced marital relationship, we could be considered soulmates, often chatting enthusiastically. But no matter how interesting the conversation was, when the sky gradually darkened, I would still tactfully remind him to leave. Every time this happened, Harrison's eyes would show a look of confusion, but I did not care and maintained a calm smile. Eventually, he would not stay long. Amber witnessed that scene many times and could not help but sigh and advise, "Madam, why must you be like this? I see that the prince has wanted to stay many times. Do you plan to live your whole life in loneliness like this? Doesn't Madam know what outsiders are saying?" Amber's words gradually turned into a choked sob. I silently to look at the horizon, which was gradually darkening. Harrison's figure leaving was extremely determined. I knew all the rumors out there perfectly well. Every time a festival or banquet arrived, my appearance always drew mocking gazes. Years ago, I was the daughter of the Grand Tutor, famous throughout the capital. Now, I was merely a decoration in the Prince of the Northern Border's estate. A woman managing the household affairs is a daughter whose destiny is not as broad as a man's. Even as the daughter of the Grand Tutor, I could not escape the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, but my heart still refused to submit. "Amber." I called her softly, then turned back, lifted her face, and gently wiped away her tears. "I know you worry about me. But from the moment he abandoned me at the wedding ceremony, I no longer expected anything. People, in the end, must live for themselves. Whatever people say, let them say it. Aren't you and I still living very well without him? I deserve to be respected and loved, not to wither away in the pity of a man. I do not need that." Amber looked at my calm face, her lips moving, but she said no more words. Then, making an excuse to prepare the meal, she ran off. Looking at her figure, I sighed, thinking that perhaps I should raise a dog so she would have something to do and stop overthinking. A few days later, the farm sent up a few chubby puppies along with a few newly weaned kittens. I chose a cat that was entirely orange, yellow with forepaws as white as snow, while Amber happily hugged a pure white puppy. I asked her what she planned to name it. She smiled and said, "Madam, can we name it Lucky?" The name was a bit simple, but when I was small I once had a dog I loved very much also called Lucky. I smiled at Amber, seeing her happy. I also felt at ease. "This cat is so round, so let's call it Chubby, okay? From now on, these 2 are entrusted to your care." Amber happily hugged the white dog, seemingly forgetting the previous troubles. Since having the cat and dog, she was busier, with less complaining and worry. But no matter how many betrothal gifts there were, they could not withstand the demands from concubine Lucy in the fragrant courtyard. Especially when they knew I was stepping in to supplement the finances, they did not hesitate to come up with all sorts of reasons to make demands. I had mentioned this briefly to Harrison a few times, but he did not care, so I did not waste any more effort. If I had to give, then give. After all, it was not my silver. When the steward once again reported that the funds in the estate were exhausted, this time I did not let Am bring money anymore. I only replied indifferently. If there is no silver left in the funds, then the whole estate should tighten their belts and save together. Of course, except for concubine Lucy's medicine, everything else must be reduced. The steward seemed hesitant and asked, "Then what about the prince?" I replied, "I will report to the prince. You do not need to worry." Hearing this, the steward seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, a smile gradually appearing on his face. He walked out with an enthusiastic demeanor, seeming ready to accomplish a great task. I knew perhaps the steward had wanted to do this for a long time, he just lacked the opportunity. Amber was playing with Lucky at that time. I called her over and told her to bring the account books from the past 2 years, especially the book kept separately for the fragrant courtyard. When she saw me make such a request, Amber giggled, her eyes curving up happily. Perhaps from the moment she started keeping this book, she had been waiting for this moment. 7 days later, I was sitting in the room, draped in a thin snow, fox fur blanket, relaxing on the chaise longue. At that moment, Harrison suddenly walked in, his face full of anger, followed by a weeping Nanny Zhao. "Why did you stop the supplies to the fragrant courtyard when Sonia is seriously ill?" he asked coldly and directly. I glanced at Nanny Zhao, the person who had always acted arrogant over the years. Concubine Lucy was becoming increasingly blatant, showing no restraint in front of me. But in front of Harrison, she acted weak. I had long realized that woman had 2 faces. In front of Harrison, she was always frail, liable to collapse from a breeze, but in front of me, she was incredibly lively, even hinting many times to provoke me, saying that being the main wife meant nothing, just living alone in a room. I smiled, saying nothing to Harrison, but waited for the day he would discover the truth about his beloved himself, to see how he would feel. Facing Harrison's questioning, I slowly pulled the snow fox fur blanket aside and calmly replied, "There is no silver left in the funds. Madame, this servant begs you to have mercy on concubine Lucy." Nanny Zhao knelt down, tears falling continuously. "It is already winter. Concubine Lucy is naturally weak, without nourishment. I fear she cannot survive this winter." I listened to Nanny Zhao speak, only raising my eyebrows slightly, sitting calmly and watching the old woman put on an act, while Harrison looked at me with cold eyes. Does the princess consort not intend to give me an explanation? I raised my eyes slightly, my voice gentle but carrying a trace of arrogance. Of course there is one. My lord, listen carefully. I stood up and continued slowly. There are still over 3,000 taels of silver in the funds, but that is the expense needed for the entire estate for the whole winter. The new year is approaching. Do the people in the estate not need warm clothes? Do they not need food to eat? As for the gifts to present to other estates, do they not need to be prepared? I do not manage the household affairs, do not know the price of rice and firewood, but surely it has not reached the point where there is no money to buy medicine for concubine Lucy. I continued. My lord, do not be angry. Please listen to my careful explanation. I turned to Amber and ordered, "Aber, bring the account books here." She bowed in obedience, took the book I had prepared from a chest, and brought it before me. I took the book, turned to a page, smiled, turned to Nanny Zhao, and said, "You are crying and begging, implying in your words that I mistreated concubine Lucy. Then let us see just how I mistreated her." I flipped to last month's records and read aloud calmly. November 2nd. Withdrew 150 taels of silver to buy 2 blue and white porcelain vases. November 3rd. Hired embroiderer Lou from the brocade shop to come and make a fox fur cloak and several new sets of clothes, totaling 850 taels. November 4th. Bought 5 caddies of premium bird's nest, 150 taels. Every time I read out an expense, Nanny Zhao's face turned a little paler. After finishing reading, I laughed faintly and handed the book to Harrison. My lord, see for yourself. Here are other expenses. I never interrupted concubine Lucy's medicine. I am just a little curious. I wonder how much medicine is enough for concubine Lucy to survive this winter. Every month there are gifts and presents, and the jewelry shops in the capital consider her a valued customer of our estate. Not to mention, every day the fragrant courtyard needs 10 caddies of pork, 5 fresh chickens. I am truly curious, if concubine Lucy is so weak, how can she eat all of that? I continued, my face still holding a slight smile. I only cut back on a few new outfits and jewelry, and reduced the food expenses a bit. Yet Nanny Zhao hurriedly ran over to blame me. Could it be that without those things, concubine Lucy cannot survive the winter? Seeing Harrison's face harden with anger, I smiled and continued. I know you love concubine Lucy, but this estate still needs to spend money. If you insist on this, either you bring silver back to replenish the funds, or you write me a letter of divorce. Without me, the prince's estate might save some costs. Harrison's face was as cold as ice. He said nothing, taking the book and flipping through each page, then looked through the other account books. Nanny Zhao beside him was trembling with fear. I did not want to watch any longer, so I led Amber away. A moment later, I heard Harrison's footsteps leaving, taking the account book and the limp Nanny Zhao with him. I turned back and told Amber to go get the key to the estate's storeroom and bring it to the prince. Amber asked in surprise. Hand it over now, madam. I laughed faintly. If not hand it over now, then wait until when? Do I plan to use my own dowry to support the entire prince's estate? This is a good opportunity. I can also let go of this burden. From now on, my dowry will only be used for us in this courtyard. A few days later, Harrison personally brought the key back. I sat silently holding a cup of tea, pushing the key back toward him. My lord, what is the meaning of this? He bowed slightly, his voice a bit embarrassed. Madam, this is my fault. The people in the fragrant courtyard have been dealt with. In the future, the estate will still have to rely on you. I took a sip of tea, saying nothing, only laughing faintly in my heart. What did the dealt with? He mentioned mean. Probably just scolding concubine Lucy a few words. After all, he loved her so much. How could I dare hope he would side with me, even for a moment? I silently looked at Harrison, knowing beforehand that things would turn out like this. Before I entered the estate, I heard that everything in the estate was managed by concubine Lucy. I spoke slowly, my eyes gentle but unable to hide the firmness. How about this? Separate the fragrant courtyard from the estate, give concubine Lucy 1/3 of the estate's finances to manage herself. If I do not manage things thoughtfully, Nanny Zhao, who pities her master, will surely take good care of her. Does the prince think that is acceptable? That cannot be done. Harrison reacted quickly, his face becoming firm. If this news leaks out, how will people gossip? I smiled faintly, responding to him with a cold voice. I do not care about the world's words. There is already enough gossip. A little more does not matter. If you truly want what is best for me, agree immediately and be done with it. Harrison fell silent. I understood the regret contained in his eyes. If you know you are wrong, why still do it? I cut him off, my voice icy. When the silver in the estate is lacking, are you telling me to take my family's money to make up for it? Does my Su family owe the Chen estate a debt? I emphasized each word, heavy as a hammer strike. I consider myself to have fulfilled the duties of a main wife, but if this matter spreads, it will only make people laugh at me. I have scolded concubine Lucy. In the future, she will no longer be wasteful like before. As for the silver she spent, I will compensate you for it, Harrison said, his voice softening slightly. No need. I took a step back, resolute. Just your acceptance of my request is enough. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. It was concubine Lucy. She barged in, disregarding the obstruction of the maids. As soon as she reached the door, she collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down, wailing. My lord, it is all my fault. I beg you and the princess consort, for the sake of Nanny Zhao having served me since childhood, spare her. Harrison's face darkened. I laughed coldly, raising my hand to order. Quickly help concubine Lucy up. The weather is so cold, do not let her catch a chill and get sick. I glanced at the maids and emphasized, dragging them down to slap each one 30 times. How did you serve that you let concubine Lucy out in this cold weather without putting on an extra coat? If concubine Lucy gets sick, who will take responsibility? My voice was gentle, as if sarcastic and full of hidden meaning. I wanted Harrison to feel his own situation and see through the hypocrisy of those around him. My lord is also heartbroken. I sighed gently. Concubine Lucy was wearing only a thin white cotton dress, her hair disabled, her face pale as a sick person. Outside, the north wind was howling. Standing on the porch for a moment would make one shiver with cold. Exposed by my words, concubine Lucy's eyes flashed with anger, looking straight at me, but in a blink, it turned into a pitiful expression. She immediately grabbed the hand of the maid being dragged away, pleading. It is all my fault. A moment of impulsiveness. I begged the princess consort to forgive Holly. Holly's face was as pale as if drained of blood, looking at me trembling. I just silently looked toward Harrison. His eyes revealed disappointment, his voice deep and cold. Help concubine Lucy up. Take her back. Holly, lead the way. Concubine Lucy was stunned, her voice trembling as she called, "My lord." But Harrison only glanced at her coldly. "Are you not taking her away yet?" I waved my hand gently, signaling. Concubine Lucy, looking frightened, was immediately helped away by the maid. When everyone left, the room became quieter. I poured a cup of tea and brought it to Harrison, speaking gently. "My lord, do you still want to maintain your stance?" Harrison accepted the tea, his eyes full of sorrow. Seeing this, I did not hide it anymore, speaking frankly. "My lord is a clear-minded person. Surely you understand clearly why Concubine Lucy behaved like that. A woman's jealousy cannot be reconciled. Even if I try to make peace with Concubine Lucy, in reality, we will always be opposed. If you want Concubine Lucy to be less sickly in the future, please follow my words." Harrison remained silent, bowing his head slightly. "I am sorry." I looked in another direction, saying nothing more. There had been too many apologies. It truly made one feel disgusted. After the incident, the expenses of the fragrant courtyard were completely separated from the prince's estate. Harrison sent his trusted subordinate to manage it, no longer having to bear the costs for the fragrant courtyard. The finances of the prince's estate gradually returned to normal. A maid came to report that Concubine Lucy, after no longer being supplied by the prince's estate, secretly engaged in business, selling silk and trading very successfully thanks to the reputation of the prince's estate. I did not care, just relaxing in my own courtyard. Time passed for another 4 years. During those 4 years, the Xiongnu at the border constantly harassed us. Harrison, in his position as the great general of the northern borders, often had to guard the border, only returning to the capital for a few months each year. Married for 6 years, I still had not had children, causing me to endure quite a bit of gossip from the people in the capital. As for Concubine Lucy, despite being favored, she could not bear children due to her weak health. The Empress Dowager summoned me to the palace many times, kindly advising, "Vivi, you should soon bear a child for Harrison. The Chen family lineage was once majestic, but now only Harrison remains. The Empress Dowager took pity and married you to him." I bowed my head and replied softly, "Vivian dares not," she sighed, speaking gently. "You two have been married for 6 years, and still no children. What should be done?" I just bowed my head, my voice gentle. "The prince is busy with many things, it is not convenient to pay attention. As for Vivian, perhaps I have no destiny with him." "What destiny?" The Empress Dowager sighed, her voice full of emotion. "The feelings between husband and wife are something that must be gradually cultivated. I know you have suffered quite a few disadvantages over the past few years. I also pity you. Harrison lost his parents when he was young and joined the army at a tender age. His character is naturally tough, he never understands what is in a woman's heart. Do not mind him too much." I bowed my head and replied, "Vivian dares not, but the prince needs someone else, not me. There are things that cannot be forced." I raised my eyes slightly, with deep implication, trying to convey that my heart no longer wanted to try. I always believed that a child was proof of the affection between husband and wife. Between me and Harrison, there was no love, so why force a deeper connection? Moreover, having a child would surely bring no small amount of trouble later. But I could not say these words, I could only blame Harrison. The Empress Dowager seemed to understand the situation between me and Harrison well, so she said no more. But what surprised me was that immediately after, I was sent to the border to take care of the prince. While packing luggage, Amber sighed constantly. "The border is harsh, the cold wind cuts like a knife. It is not a good place," Amber whispered. But I felt excitement in my heart, leaving the dull place with nothing interesting at the prince's estate. Going out to see this, and that was not a bad thing, even if I had to be with Harrison. It seemed it would not be that unpleasant. On the day of departure, the sun was shining beautifully, and a gentle breeze was blowing. My brother rode a horse to see me off. "Vivi, be careful over there. Do not leave the military camp without permission, understand?" "I know, brother." I smiled. "You have reminded me again and again with Mom and Dad. I remember." My brother looked at me and sighed. "When you meet the prince over there, do not quarrel with him. The battlefield is dangerous, he is already tired. No matter what, Mom and Dad still hope you two have some affection for each other." I smiled and replied, "Brother, you are wrong to say that. When have I ever quarreled with him? These past few years we haven't lived badly together." My brother looked at me with dissatisfaction, his voice stern. "You really think others cannot see your intentions? You two are only husband and wife in name, in reality, you are very distant from each other. Vivi, I understand you have grievances, but ultimately, You two will live together for a lifetime. Do you plan to spend your whole life alone in that small courtyard? I remained silent, biting my lip. Lately, many people had come to advise me, as if everything would be fine as long as I took the initiative. I also didn't know how to answer. Harrison was a good person. Unlike those others who lusted after 3 wives and 4 concubines, he always kept his promise of one love for a lifetime. Being loved by him was happiness, but not being loved by him was misfortune. I had known early on that this fate, since marrying into the prince's estate, was not something I could change. To avoid further scolding, I smiled and replied, "Brother, I understand." The carriage rolled for more than a month, finally reaching the border. The further north we went, the colder it felt. When we arrived at Hyong City, where Harrison was stationed, I had to put on a thick fox fur cloak. But as soon as I stepped out of the carriage, the cold wind made it impossible for me to open my eyes. Harrison had received the news beforehand. He personally came to welcome me. He stepped forward, took my arm, and led me into the estate. The subordinates around him, who had followed him for many years, cheered and called me sister-in-law, making me a bit shy but also feeling familiar, as I often welcomed them when they returned to the capital. Over the years, the relationship between Harrison and me hasn't been good, nor has it been bad. We could be called compatible friends. In the warm house, a pot of glowing charcoal was burning, radiating warmth throughout the room. An old woman wearing blue cloth clothes approached me. "Madam?" Harrison said. "This is Auntie Wang, a local. If you need anything, just ask her for help." I smiled politely. "Very well. Then I will trouble everyone to arrange the luggage I brought. It is almost the end of the year. Tonight we can have a delicious meal." I nodded slightly. Although I had just arrived in a strange place, my heart felt no awkwardness. After resting for a while, I began to arrange everything in the house. Harrison stayed with me for a while, but then military affairs called him out, and he didn't return until night. I ordered a hot pot to be prepared in the front courtyard. Harrison ate and drank happily with his brothers. I stayed in the room with Amber, dismissing the other servants. "Madam, this mutton is truly delicious," Amber praised. Mountain mutton in the northern borders is a tribute item. The meat is tender and has no strong smell. "If you like it, eat some more," I said while smiling, putting another piece of mutton into my mouth, eating deliciously until my eyes squinted. Harrison walked in right at that moment. Amber immediately stood up, grease still on her mouth, and hurriedly stammered, My lord." I glanced at him and asked slowly, "Why so fast? The military camp has a curfew, and it is far from here. Are you full? Do you want to eat something more?" I picked up my chopsticks and signaled. Harrison did not refuse and sat down at the table. I waved my hand to tell Amber to change to another pot. He calmly picked up his chopsticks and asked, "How is mother? I heard she had a cold a while ago." "She has fully recovered. The maids took great care of her. Now she can walk in the garden." "That is good." I picked up a piece of radish, put it in my mouth, and asked gently, "Is it good for the prince at the border?" Harrison looked up at me and replied in a deep voice, "You should not have come at this time. Winter is naturally cold. The Xiongnu people on the steppe do not have enough food and livestock to survive the season, so they often come down to harass the border. It is harsh. There is nothing fun. So, have there been many Xiongnu raids recently?" I asked further. 2 more months until the harshest time, when snow falls thick as goose feathers, that is when they will act." Harrison spoke calmly, but his voice contained the coldness of a leader, a person shouldering the responsibility of guarding the border. I knew I shouldn't have come here, but I couldn't refuse the Empress Dowager's order. I smiled lightly. "My lord, it has been 2 years since you returned to the capital for the new year. The Empress Dowager is worried about you, so she sent me to take care of you. The Empress Dowager misses the prince very much." Although I understood that the Empress Dowager's intention wasn't just that simple, I had to pretend not to understand. "I am used to being at the border. This place is not like the capital. You just need to take good care of yourself, do not get sick," Harrison said, taking a sip of mutton soup. Steam rose, and a thin layer of sweat covered his forehead. "I know, my lord has worked hard." After the meal was finished and the food cleared away, the night was late. Amber prepared bathwater in the room. I went in to bathe, and not long after, I heard a loud noise echoing from afar. Scattered sounds echoed from somewhere distant, sounding like terrifying screams. Amber, what is happening?" I stepped out of the bathtub, turned my head toward the window, and asked loudly. Amber's voice didn't penetrate, but standing outside the bathroom door was Auntie Wang. She replied softly, "Madam, do not worry. To the north, the Xiongnu army has come down to provoke again. The prince has already gone to the military camp. Madam, just rest assured, they cannot break in." Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief and sat back in the warm water. The weather was cold, leaving the water for just a moment made my skin freeze. "Does this happen often?" I asked. "Not very often, only 2 or 3 times a month, but with the northern garrison guarding, Madam can rest assured," Auntie Wang replied. "Does Madam need more hot water?" "Add some." I waved my hand gently, my hair disheveled on my forehead. A round of hot water was added, soothing the cold on my skin. After finishing the bath, Amber handed me a soft cotton towel. I dried myself, put on a fur coat, and crawled into the warm bed in the room where charcoal was burning. Even so, compared to capital, the biting cold of the northern borders was much fiercer. "Aber, where did you just go?" I asked. "I called but didn't see you anywhere." Amber immediately handed me a cup of hot water and replied, "Madam, this servant heard loud noises out there, so I hurried to inquire about the news. Madam, do not worry, the prince has already gone. This city is very safe." Those shunk and I took a sip of hot water, nodded gently and asked further, "So will he return?" Amber replied, "Probably not. This servant heard the maids in the estate say that at times like this, the prince often stays at the main camp. Thanks to the prince guarding, the people in the city can sleep peacefully like this." I nodded and handed the water cup back to Amber. "All right, it is not early anymore. Amber, you go rest early." Amber hesitated and asked, "Does Madam want this servant to stay and keep you company tonight?" I shook my head. "No need, you just go rest." I looked around the large room, but it was simply furnished. A square table, chairs against the wall, next to it a desk and bookshelf. On the shelf were all kinds of books arranged neatly. Next to it was a large blue and white porcelain vase with a few carefully preserved swords inserted. In the outer room, apart from a standing wooden cabinet, there was nothing else. It was completely different from the magnificent luxury of the capital. It was in this place that Harrison had resided for 10 long years. 10 years facing the cutting cold, but the passion in his heart had never cooled. "You withdraw." At my insistence. Before leaving, she did not forget to instruct, "Madam, this servant will be right outside. If anything happens, just call me." "No need, you just go rest." When Amber left, I quietly stepped out of bed, my feet kept warm by thick cotton, padded shoes, put on a cotton coat, and approached the bookshelf. I loved reading books, it was the same back home. Seeing this shelf full of books, my heart couldn't help but rejoice. Harrison agreeing to let me stay here seemed not to mind me reading his books. I glanced through, most were books on military strategy and tactics, a small part on water conservancy, and the rest were poetry, travel notes, and music scores. The genres were very rich. I randomly pulled out a book and turned a few pages. Suddenly, a small dried flower fell out of the book. I picked it up, the pale purple flower lay on my fair palm, looking truly delicate and lovely. I smiled gently, then placed the flower back in its old spot and continued turning the pages. This was a book on military strategy and tactics. The content should have been very difficult to understand, but the author cleverly used many small stories to lead, making the reading not dry. I also saw many notes by Harrison in the book. Compared to his stern and cold appearance, these notes revealed a much more cheerful and innocent side. It could be seen that these were lines he wrote when he was young. The handwriting was still quite immature. At the end of the book, I noticed a line of deep handwriting. "Vow to dedicate my whole life to protecting Great Xia, for the country to be peaceful and the people safe, for the common people to live and work in peace. Choosing this life, no regrets." I gently stroked that line of text. The pen strokes were etched deep into the paper. One could see the strong sentiment when the writer recorded this vow. The Chen family, from one generation to the next, had sacrificed for the country, using blood and bone to exchange for peace for the world. Harrison, the last of the Chen family, did not fail his ancestors, protecting Great Xia to the end. He was an evil god in the eyes of the Xiongnu, but a majestic general guarding the northern borders of the imperial court. What young girl's heart wouldn't dream of a hero? Having heard too many legends about him before the marriage was decreed, I had also felt a flutter of emotion. But regrettably, he was good, but not a good match for me. Even the matter of divorce, I dared not speak of. That year, when my father submitted a petition, just one sentence from the emperor rejected it. "Harrison is alone. The Chen family now has only him left. Do you still remember the debt of saving your life owed to the old general years ago?" My father had to remain silent, unable to say another word. I only learned later that when he was young, my father had been saved by old General Chen at the border, and perhaps the old general's death was partly due to the wounds from years ago. Currently, I was just repaying the debt of gratitude for the Chen family. Thinking of the Empress Dowager's expectations, I only felt a headache. I stood before the window. Tonight the sky was cloudless. The moonlight was still bright and clear. In these northern borders, perhaps it was not much different from the capital, but there was a slight change. I couldn't sleep all night. After Harrison went to the military camp, he didn't return. Hearing the people in the estate recount, last night he led the troops to capture more than 100 Songnu soldiers, including a prince. Currently, they were all imprisoned in the city's great dungeon. His work would surely be busy for the next few days. These matters were not my part to worry about. I spent the whole next day learning about the situation in the estate, then I went out with Amber. The northern borders had a bold folk style, completely different from the young ladies in the capital who stayed indoors. Women here going out to do business was nothing strange. I took off the fur hat covering my face and walked out onto the street with Amber and Auntie Wang. The streets were crowded, people were bustling and lively, no less than in the capital. I could clearly see the happiness and peace present on their faces. Steam rose from the mutton buns, looking truly delicious. The smell of meat permeated the bun casing. I pulled Amber's hand, approaching to line up with everyone, listening to them discuss Harrison and the incident with the Xiongnu the night before. The people of Huyang City, in their words, all expressed deep respect and admiration for Harrison. Amber's eyes lit up, she pulled my sleeve, her chin held high. Indeed, with Harrison's achievements he was worth being proud of. When it was our turn, Amber ordered 3 mutton buns. The bun seller looked at us, immediately took 7 or 8 buns, and put them in a bag until there was no more room, then handed it to Amber. Amber stared wide-eyed, hugging the bag of buns, both confused and angry, opening her mouth to scold. "Little brother, what are you doing? We only need 3. Why are you stuffing so many in?" The bun seller panicked, hurriedly waving his hands. No, these buns are free. No need to pay. Free. I asked in surprise. Why? You are the madam from the Prince of the Northern Borders estate, right? The little bun seller smiled and said, "If it is the princess consort of the Prince of the Northern Borders, then it is no problem at all. Madam coming to eat my buns, that is my honor. Our Hyang City, if not for the prince and the Northern Army, would have been trampled by those Xiongnu long ago. I can take money from anyone, but I cannot take money from the madam." I laughed and replied, "How can this be? Doing small business, how can I let you suffer a loss?" Amber finally understood, hurriedly taking money from her pocket. The people around, hearing the bun seller's words, also began to gather, their burning gazes focused on me. I had never been stared at so intently. In a moment I couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Auntie Wang and Amber quickly stood to shield me. The girls and women around also began to talk in a friendly manner. "This is the princess consort, right? So beautiful, skin white and smooth as jade. Princess consort, please accept this. How can we take your money?" The enthusiasm of the people exceeded my expectations. I could even see many other vendors wanting to give their best food to me. On their faces, sincerity was clearly visible. These actions had no intention of flattery or desire to receive anything in return, but were simply gratitude. At that moment, I suddenly understood more clearly how good Harrison's reputation was in the hearts of the people of Huyang City. Amber and Auntie Wang were already hugging arms, full of gifts from everyone. Fortunately, Auntie Wang had experience, so she had secretly arranged for people to follow us for support. I was surrounded by a team of guards. Looking at those honest and emotional faces, I spoke seriously. "Everyone, please do not push. Do not push anymore. Be careful. Watch out for the children. Stay safe." But the crowd still hadn't calmed down. I couldn't help but speak louder. "Everyone, please calm down and listen to me say a few words, okay?" Amber also helped me call for order. A while later, the crowd gradually quieted down. They looked at me with eyes full of admiration and sincerity. I coughed lightly, regained my composure, and then slowly said, "I clearly understand the gratitude and respect you all have for the prince. I accept your hearts on behalf of my husband, but please take back these gifts. Protecting the country is the duty of soldiers. It is also thanks to you standing behind to support that our great Shia can resist foreign invaders. I am extremely grateful for everyone's support. On behalf of my husband, I bow in thanks." Finished speaking, I respectfully bowed, performing the etiquette solemnly. In the crowd, a few cheers suddenly rang out, and not far away, the sound of hoofbeats echoed. Everyone looked into the distance. Harrison rode a horse slowly approaching. The prince of the northern borders has arrived. Someone cried out. I turned my head to look. Seeing him, I breathed a sigh of relief. Harrison agilely dismounted, instructed the surrounding guards with a few words, then walked straight to me. The crowd immediately separated automatically to both sides. Thank you everyone for your kindness. This prince accepts it all. Now everyone please disperse. Do not scare my madam. He smiled and said. The weather today is truly beautiful. Do not crowd around here anymore. Having said that, Harrison took my hand and pulled me to the white horse. His beloved horse, Snowy, was a horse he rarely let anyone touch. At this moment it tilted its head, its big round eyes looking at me, its nose rubbing gently against me. I gently stroked its head. Suddenly, my body felt light as Harrison lifted me onto the horse. In just a split second, he also climbed up, his arms wrapping around my waist, urging the horse forward. I was startled and panicked. Laughter and teasing sounds rang out around us. Things like this in the capital would be absolutely unacceptable, but it seemed that in this northern region, it was nothing strange. Do not worry, they have no malicious intent. Harrison's deep, warm voice rang in my ear. I understood that they were just curious about me. I gently adjusted the flap of my coat, trying to shift forward to create distance from him. But the saddle wasn't large. No matter how hard I tried, I could still feel the warmth transmitting from his body. Even though we were married, I had never been this close to any man, causing my face to flush red and my heart to beat wildly. Finally, arriving at the gate of the estate, Harrison agilely lifted me off the horse. I hurriedly took a few steps back, unnaturally adjusting my hair, and whispered thanks. He didn't reply, just threw the reins to the personal guard behind him. I am hungry. Is there anything to eat? I will prepare them immediately. I quickly replied. Harrison naturally disliked being served by others, and the estate didn't have many servants. Normally, meals in the estate were managed by Auntie Wang. I also didn't bring many people when I came here. Amber quickly went ahead to arrange things, also panting when she returned. I put on an apron, placed a small stool for him to help wash the vegetables, while I began to knead the dough. In the capital, young ladies of noble families usually didn't have to enter the kitchen. Many even considered cooking to beat their dignity, thinking that kitchen smoke would tarnish their smooth skin. But in my family, it was a bit different. My mother loved cooking, especially for my father. She often said she liked watching my father eat the food she cooked. It made her feel happy. When I was small, I often sat by the stove watching my mother's face flush red from the heat, feeling that at that moment, she was even more beautiful than when wearing precious jewelry. Madam, it is done. Amber said after a while. Rest well, help me chop the filling. I replied, thinking that in this border region, mutton was probably too familiar to him. So I took some pork mixed with cabbage to make 2 different types of filling. The broth I simmered from sheep bones. When the dumplings were just cooked, it was half an hour later. I, along with Amber, brought the steaming hot dumplings into the room. Harrison was resting on the bed, still not having taken off his coat. When I entered, he was not yet awake. Amber placed the dumplings on the table. I signaled for her to withdraw. Amber glanced at me with a bit of worry but said nothing, obediently leaving the room. I approached the bed, looking at his tired face. That face was still handsome but looked much more wary. Stubble had begun to sprout on his chin, there were dark circles under his eyes. I could clearly see that over the past few days, he must not have had time to rest. Even though there were many unspeakable things between us, and in the capital, many people thought he hadn't treated me well. At this moment, I couldn't utter a word of complaint. I and thousands of great citizens could live peacefully in our homes thanks to people like him standing in front of us, blocking countless dangers. I lowered my eyes, gently placed my hand on his shoulder and called softly, "My lord. My lord, the dumplings are ready." The person on the bed slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was still dreamy but quickly became alert. "Is it easy to go?" I whispered. He propped himself up with his hand and sat up, glancing at the steaming dumplings on the table. He walked over, used chopsticks to pick one up, put it in his mouth, his eyes glancing at me. "Did you make this?" he asked. I nodded slightly, a familiar warmth rising in my heart. Back in the capital, every New Year, I also went to the kitchen. Besides the portion sent to my parents, the rest mainly went into his stomach. He naturally disliked wasting food. I knew that very well. I ladled a bowl of hot soup and brought it to him. I heard you caught an important figure, how is it now? I asked gently. It is Wanyan's youngest son, his favorite, named Chesa. Currently, he is being escorted to the capital. In these days, you need to be a bit careful. I have sent people to guard around the courtyard. If anything happens, just tell them. Wanyan's side might make a move. Harrison replied, his face full of contemplation. I understand. I nodded slightly, knowing that Harrison could eat a lot, so I had prepared a very large portion of dumplings. I picked up my chopsticks and also began to eat slowly. You have worked hard, I said. It is nothing, he replied, but his tone was tired, his hand raising to rub his forehead. Hopefully this year everyone in Huiyang City can have a peaceful new year. It all depends on what agreement His Majesty can finally reach with Wanyan, and how important that Chesa is in his eyes. I picked up another dumpling and gave it to him. The Xiongnu people are different from the Central Plains. Every great Khan steps up over the blood and bones of his brothers. To them, concepts of propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame seem not to exist. The weak are eaten, the strong become king. He shook his head. I do not have much hope about this. We can claim ourselves to be civilized, but ultimately it is just a veneer. I whispered softly, unable to hold back the words. Harrison stopped, his voice dropping, cautious. Watch your words. I was startled, realizing my eyes had flashed slightly, but I still looked straight at him. In front of me, you can say anything, but absolutely do not let half a word leak out. He looked at me sternly. I know. I bowed my head and replied. He paused, his eyes becoming complicated. After a moment of silence, he whispered. Vivi, you do not need to worry. I admit there are many things I haven't done right by you. But as long as I am here, I will certainly protect you and your family, safe from worry. I was silent for a moment, my lips slightly pursed, my eyes becoming gentler. I believe you. Thank you. Harrison said nothing more. He quickly finished the rest of the dumplings, then stood up and went into the bathroom. A moment later, he was fast asleep on the bed. I stood watching him for a while, then pulled the quilt to cover him more before silently leaving the room. Over the years, although we were husband and wife, our relationship was more like friends. People often said the Xiongnu were savage and cruel, but the throne of the great Xia dynasty was also soaked in plenty of blood. News of the emperor's declining health was no longer a secret, causing the princes to constantly plot. My father, being the crown prince's grand tutor, naturally took a side and was swept into the vortex of power, unable to escape. His loyalty and patriotism made it impossible for him to withdraw. Now looking back, the emperor's insistence on marrying me to Harrison was not without motive. I am the princess consort of the northern borders. This naturally forces Harrison to side with the crown prince. Since ancient times, political power has always been tied to military power. The one holding the army always carries more weight than others. The northern army was Harrison's elite force, loyal only to him. They survived years of war, thanks to his strict but fair leadership. Perhaps the emperor had seen through both my and Harrison's characters, one who would not force others, and one who refused to bow down. Perhaps after Harrison, the Chen family would have no descendants. After resting at the estate for a few days, Harrison returned to the military camp, only occasionally coming back to stay for a few days. Perhaps fearing I was lonely, he arranged for many wives of the military officers to visit me. They were all northerners, with straightforward and open personalities. Initially, it was a bit awkward, but after getting familiar, everyone became open and affectionate. I gradually integrated with them. Life at the border was harsh, but these leisurely days were not bad. One day, while I was embroidering with the other ladies in the estate, I was working on a new pair of shoes for Harrison. Suddenly, panicked screams rang out from the courtyard. Before I could ask, Amber rushed in, gasping for breath. Something is wrong. Do not panic. What happened? My heart sank, my voice stern. Amber had followed me for many years. I rarely saw her face as frightened as it was now, except for the time I had a persistent high fever. My lord. The prince has met with trouble. Amber choked out, her voice full of tears, causing the entire room to suddenly fall silent. I stood up abruptly, the unfinished embroidered shoe fell to the table. I quickly supported her and listened to the whole story. A letter from the imperial palace arrived, ordering the escort of Wanyan's favorite son, Chesa, back to the capital for trial. Today was the day Harrison planned to depart, but for some reason, the news leaked. En route, hundreds of Xiongnu ambushed them to rescue the prisoner. According to those who escaped and returned, blood and the bodies of soldiers were everywhere. Search parties had been sent out, but it was unclear whether they were alive or dead. This time, The escort team included the husbands of some of the ladies present here. Upon hearing this, a few people could not hold back their panic and collapsed to the ground, their eyes completely chaotic, not knowing what to do. I took a deep breath, clenched my fists, and tried to remain calm. Ladies, there is no need to panic. We must trust the prince and the generals, they will be fine. This place cannot fall into chaos. I spoke with a stern voice while ordering servants to help the ladies who had fallen. I turned to Amber and asked through gritted teeth, "How many people know about this right now?" Amber wiped her tears and stammered, I am not sure. Go call Auntie Wang." Before I finished speaking, Auntie Wang walked in quickly from outside. "Madam, currently only a few high-ranking officials in the military camp know, and the rest are just people in our estate." "I understand now. Immediately block the news until there is precise information from the prince. Absolutely do not let the people in the city panic. At the same time, tell the soldiers at the city gate to strengthen inspections of people entering and leaving. If necessary, lock down the city. Absolutely do not let spies spread rumors to cause trouble." "Yes, madam," Auntie Wang quickly replied. After giving instructions, I looked at the ladies in the room, smiling to comfort them with a few words, then seriously reminded them. "The prince and the generals are fine, they just have business and need to go away for a few days. I hope you ladies will maintain the big picture." These ladies were all intelligent, and women of the border were naturally very resilient. They had only lost their composure initially due to worry. At this moment they gritted their teeth and nodded in agreement. Perhaps because I did not love Harrison, I was the first to regain calmness in this moment. This matter was truly unexpected. After seeing the ladies off, I sat alone in the room for half an hour until Amber knocked on the door. "Madam, let's eat." No matter what, the days still had to pass. Remembering a few days ago, I was discussing celebrating the new year at the border with Harrison, but now this had happened. I shook my head, trying to push the chaotic thoughts out of my mind. The immediate worry was not those things. I stepped out, forcing myself to finish the meal, then sent Auntie Wang out to inquire about news. The news received at midnight was not optimistic at all. People from the military camp reported finding fragments of the prince's equipment by the riverbank, along with large bloodstains. It seemed he was heavily injured and forced to jump into the river to escape. Not to mention the wounds, in such a cold winter. Just falling into the icy river was enough to leave a person half dead. Amber sat worriedly beside me in the room. I searched everywhere, found 2 daggers, and handed one to her. She accepted the dagger with trembling hands. "Madam," she called softly, her eyes filled with anxiety. I glanced at her, gently tucking the remaining dagger into my sleeve. "The situation is unstable now. Keep this for self-defense. If things reach a point beyond salvation." Before I finished, Amber's face turned pale, but she still nodded firmly, her voice trembling. "I understand." Seeing her so frightened, I couldn't help but hug her gently to comfort her. "Amber, do not worry. Things may not be as bad as you think. We must have faith in the prince. After all, he has confronted the Songnu at the border for so many years, he is not easily defeated. All we can do now is keep the rear stable." I spoke while patting her back. The words of comfort were not only for Amber but also for myself. It was unclear when the news of Harrison being ambushed had spread outside. Indeed, there is no wall in this world that can block the wind. The situation became increasingly tense. Officials in the city issued announcements to correct the information many times, but the fact that the prince had not appeared for a long time was undeniable. In the military camp, people's hearts were wavering. At the same time, outside the city, the Songnu began to show signs of movement. Rumors spread continuously that Harrison was dead. To the people of the northern borders, the prince was like the sky, and now the sky had collapsed. I once secretly went out to observe the situation. Most people in the city wore expressions of grief and fear. On one hand, they did not believe Harrison had passed away. On the other, they could not stop doubting. I saw a wealthy merchant beaten by the people of the northern borders for speaking disrespectfully. Their emotions were like a pile of dry wood, just a spark could ignite it. No one knew when that fire would be lit. "Madam, someone from the capital has arrived and is currently waiting in the estate." Amber lowered her voice to report. "I know." I nodded, turned, and got into the carriage. The visitor was no stranger, it was Eunuch Harold, the Empress Dowager's trusted confidant. Many times when I entered the palace to meet the Empress Dowager, it was he who received me. "Princess Consort, this old servant is here by the Empress Dowager's order to welcome you back to the capital." Back to the capital at this time. I sat on the chair, frowned slightly, and signaled Amber to pour tea for the guest. The northern borders had no tea, nor did people here favor it much. I wasn't interested in tea either, so I only brought a little, which was long used up. The tea currently in the estate was ordinary goods bought from outside. Eunuch Harold, accustomed to fine tea, only touched his lips to it and put it down immediately. This was within my expectations, so I didn't mind, just waited for him to speak. The prince's matter is truly heartbreaking. The situation here is unstable. The Empress Dowager is very worried about your safety. Staying here is of no help, it is better to return to the capital for safety. The snow hasn't fallen yet, so travel will be convenient. Hearing this, I shook my head to refuse. Eunuch Harold's words are somewhat mistaken. Although the prince is missing, he is still alive. If alive, I must see the person. If dead, I must see the corpse. At this time, the people are panicked, and the Xiongnu in the north are lurking, possibly advancing south at any time. I am the princess consort. If I abandon the city and run back to the capital now, what will become of the people in the city? Princess consort, now is not the time to act on emotion. You should also think of your parents in the capital. Eunuch Harold tried to persuade me. I frowned, my eyes sharp, looking straight at him. Has Eunuch Harold heard some news? These days, many bad rumors have appeared in the city, as if a storm is coming. He stammered, daring not to speak clearly. I was annoyed but remained calm. Even at this point, do you still want to hide it from me? Finally, he sighed, adjusted his expression, and spoke in a low voice. According to reliable news, Wanyan is gathering the Xiongnu army, preparing to advance south in 5 days. To maintain stability in the city, this matter is absolutely secret. Princess consort, please follow this old servant back to the capital. I was momentarily stunned, my heart beating fast, my hand holding the teacup nearly unsteady. Biting my tongue hard, and asked anxiously, "Is this true?" He replied, "It is true, otherwise, how would this old servant dare to travel so hard to get here?" His face clearly showed distress. I bowed my head and whispered, "I have troubled you, Eunuch Harold. So, Princess Consort, time is running out. Please pack your things and follow this old servant back to the capital tomorrow." Saying this, he stood up. I took a deep breath and waved Amber over. "Arrange for Eunuch Harold to rest. I need time to think." Perhaps seeing that I looked unwell, he did not force me further and followed Amber to the front courtyard to rest. After Amber saw him out, she hurriedly returned with a worried face, closed the door, and spoke urgently. "Madam, should we leave?" I placed my hand on Amber's shoulder, pressed her down onto a chair, my face contemplative. I picked up the teacup, took a sip, and shook my head. "Why?" Amber asked insistently. "War is imminent. If something really happens, those barbarians won't care if you are a princess consort or not. Being captured is worse than death." Amber panicked. I reassured her. "Calm down. Things are not that serious. Even without Harrison, we must trust the Northern Army. Besides, this matter truly has too many strange points. Think about it. Eunuch Harold is old and usually lives comfortably in the palace. If someone was sent, it shouldn't be him. The Empress Dowager may not care about me that much, right? If Harrison is truly dead, given her personality, she would want me to follow him to the grave. Why would she be so kind as to take me back to the capital?" I smiled faintly, my eyes becoming deeper. Amber gasped in surprise. "Then why did he come here?" "It is unclear, but keep him here for now." The servant asked. "Keep him how?" "Eunuch Harold is old. His body certainly doesn't suit the cold weather of the northern borders. I think he will soon become tired and ill." I looked at Amber. Knowing this action was a bit despicable, the feeling of unease in my heart forced me to do something. Amber understood, nodding solemnly. "Madam, do you think the story about the Xiongnu advancing south that Eunuch Harold mentioned is true?" "Perhaps it is true. Haven't you noticed that lately, the ladies have been visiting the estate more and more? Regardless, preparing in advance is not wrong." I pondered, my hand gripping the dagger hidden in my sleeve, making my skin ache. The next morning, Eunuch Harold fell ill and was bedridden, because of a bowl of soup Amber personally delivered. The plan to return to the capital was thus delayed. As for those who came with him, I ordered Harrison's men to detain them. Perhaps I had hidden it too well before, so no one expected I could do such things, but in reality, I could do anything to soothe the unease in my heart. The Xiongnu advancing south was not 5 days later as Eunuch Harold said, but delayed by 2 more days. At that time, the main northern army had been deceived by false intelligence, leaving only a small force to guard the city. thanks to Vice General Wang reacting in time. The Songnu army did not capture the city, but we also had to pay a heavy price. The entire northern district turned into a sea of fire. The physicians in the medical center stayed up all night treating the wounded. Cries and screams echoed everywhere. I was not trained in military affairs, but fortunately, I had learned a little medicine when I was young. Rolling up my sleeves, I joined the ranks of those treating the wounded in the medical center. At this time, all the people in the city who still had strength participated in defending the city, but the number of wounded was too great, and there were not enough physicians. I worked for 3 consecutive days, hardly resting. When I was so tired that my head was spinning, a pair of hands supported me to sit down on the side, and a cup of hot water was brought to my face. I looked up and saw Madame Valerie, wearing red armor, looking at me meaningfully. "I thought you had run away," she said, her voice full of amusement. I tried to curl my lips, looking around at the wounded still being brought in endlessly, and laughed bitterly. "Where else can I go? Didn't Eunuch Harold come to take you away?" "Ah, he is still lying in bed, surely he won't be able to get up for a few months," I replied wittily. This matter was no longer a secret in the city, and perhaps because of this, the eyes of the people looking at me had changed, becoming more respectful than before. Previously, they respected me because I was Harrison's wife, but now they respected me for who I was. Surely they did not expect that when war broke out, a young lady raised in the capital like me would not run away, but fight alongside them in the medical center. Madame Valerie heard this and laughed loudly. "Vivian, you are truly an interesting person. I have made a friend in you." I said it before, Harrison's eyes were not wrong. I frowned slightly, feeling a bit surprised in my heart, but before I could ask more, the battle ahead became urgent again. Madame Valerie immediately ran over. She was from a martial family and had studied military strategy since childhood, so she was clearly more useful than I was in resisting foreign invaders. At that moment, Amber quietly approached me. Amber's voice was choked and trembling as she spoke. "Madam, what should we do? The medicine is almost running out, there is only enough for 3 more days. When will the Northern Army return?" Listening to her, my head felt dizzy. I bit my tongue hard to keep myself awake and replied, "Do not rush. Let me think of a way." 3 days passed and the Northern Army had not yet returned. The medicine in the city was nearly exhausted. Looking at the wounded soldiers lying scattered on the floor of the medical center, waiting for nothing but death, my heart tightened. I gritted my teeth, turned to Amber and said, "Call some people to follow me." "Where are you going, madam?" Amber asked worriedly. "To find medicine," I replied, pulling the dagger hidden in my chest pocket. The blade gleamed under the sunlight, emitting a chilling coldness. Hearing me say we were going to find medicine, except for the physicians and nurses who could not leave, everyone in the medical center with any strength left hurriedly followed me. I led the group across the Sunshine Avenue to the front of the Hu estate. The pitch black gates of the estate were tightly shut. The signboard bearing the words Hu Estate was painted in a blinding red. I narrowed my eyes and signaled for someone to go up and knock. The Hu family was a wealthy clan that traded heavily in furs within the city. Many of their descendants held positions in the Northern Army. Few people knew that the Hu estate also secretly cooperated with the Northern Merchant Hall to trade in medicine. I knew this partly due to the connections I had investigated while still in the capital, and partly because the granddaughter of the Hu family had unintentionally revealed it while trying to curry favor with me. Although the Hu estate had contributed quite a bit of money in the past few days, I understood that what they offered was only a small fraction of their immense fortune. Not long after we knocked, the gatekeeper poked his head out. Seeing the scene before him, he jumped in fright. He became even more panicked when he saw me, covered in blood and dirt, looking nothing like my usual self. "Call your master out to meet me." I did not bother to say much, giving a direct order. My voice was hoarse from speaking too much over the past few days. I had to exert effort to make myself heard clearly. The gatekeeper dared not delay. He stumbled and ran inside. I waved my hand and ordered, "Push the door open." A moment later, Master Huo ran out from the estate in a hurry, his clothes disheveled. Behind him were his wife, concubines, and daughter. I did not know the princess consort was gracing us with her presence. "This old man failed to welcome you in time. From afar, I see the princess consort bringing many people here. Is there something important?" he asked with a cautious look. "Nothing major, but it is very urgent." The medicine in the city has been exhausted. I hope Master Hu will set an example for the wealthy families in the city and contribute some medicine for the wounded soldiers. I spoke straightforwardly. Arguments. I only hope you will cooperate. Master Hu's face suddenly became awkward. He forced a smile and said, Princess Consort, it is not that this old servant does not want to help, but the Hu family trades in furs, not medicine. The meager amount of medicine we had left was sent away long ago. There is truly no way. Hearing this, I laughed coldly and waved my hand to order my people to enter and search. At this time, the people in the city, hearing the news that I had come to demand medicine, had also gathered in a crowded mass in front of the estate. Seeing this, Master Hu's expression immediately changed. He shouted loudly, Princess Consort, what are you doing? Do you want to rob a house or break into a private residence? Our Hu family has sacrificed so many descendants for the border region. Princess Consort, is doing this worth chilling the hearts of the soldiers and people of the northern borders? Hearing this, those preparing to search hesitated slightly. I let out a dry laugh, my hoarse voice ringing out a few times. Continue. If there is any crime, the Princess Consort, will bear it all. After speaking, I turned to look straight at Master Hu and mocked him. What you call sacrifice is just the death of a few illegitimate children. Over the years, you have earned no small amount from supplying military provisions, yet you dare to speak such flowery words. We are all people who understand the situation. Do not pretend anymore. Huo Dian, if Huiyang City falls, I will be the first to take your life. For every moment you delay, another person dies. I looked straight into Master Huo's vicious face, ignoring him further, and only urged the crowd. Do not hesitate. After searching for a while, finally, under my coercion with a gleaming knife, Master Huo's only legitimate son had to confess the hiding place of the medicine. A large amount of medicine was neatly arranged in the underground cellar, inciting the anger of the people. The red eyes of the wounded soldiers' relatives were filled with resentment. They just wanted to rush in and tear the Hu family apart. I stopped them to avoid any unfortunate incidents. I ordered people to imprison the Hu family inside, only giving them a few bowls of porridge every day. As long as they did not starve to death, it was fine. Thanks to that medicine, the medical center was able to continue operating. I wrote a few letters and sent Amber to deliver them to other wealthy families in the city. I did not know how they would react, but even if it was the final move, I had to try. A few days later, another amount of medicine and food was sent over. When Madame Valerie arrived, I was busy checking the goods in the warehouse. She looked at me with complicated eyes and spoke. Vivian, you are truly brave. I turned to look at her. The wound on her shoulder was still oozing blood. My hand did not stop writing in the ledger. I smiled and replied, what is there not to dare? I am the daughter of the Imperial Grand Tutor. My father is the Emperor's teacher. My brother is the Minister of Revenue, holding the treasury. And my husband is the great general of the northern borders with a resounding reputation. What is there that I dare not do? Have you ever thought about how the world will look at you after you return? They will say the Princess Consort of the northern borders abused her power, bullied others, and forcibly seized property. The families you robbed have all taken root in the northern borders for generations. Their power is not small. Madame Valerie forced a smile, her face showing a fleeting look of pain. I do not know what the world thinks of me. I replied. I only know that every day in the city, people are dying. Valerie, do you know? From childhood until now, I have never even seen a chicken being killed. This is the first time I have seen a real battlefield. The soldiers have shed blood, do not let them shed any more tears. I see saving their lives as the most important thing, more than anything else. As for those hiding medicine, what do you want me to think? While hiding is in difficulty, their actions are no different from aiding the enemy. If the city falls, what is the use of keeping medicine and food? I looked at her coldly and spoke slowly. Is it because Harrison is not here that you all were preparing to run away? Madame Valerie's face turned pale, her eyes flickering. After a moment of silence, she laughed bitterly. You are truly worthy of being the daughter of the famous Grand Tutor in the capital. You are truly sharp. I said nothing more, just waited for her to speak. She continued. The Northern Army is no longer what it used to be. The Chen family now only has Harrison left. Moreover, he has no hair. Hearing the words, no hair, my brows knitted slightly, showing a hint of surprise. Madame Valerie did not notice and continued. Everyone has ambition and desire. When Harrison was here, with his reputation, he could still suppress everything. But now he is missing, his life or death unknown. People's hearts are easily disturbed. The northern borders fight all year round. Internally, the army is also divided between the war faction and the peace faction. Everyone wants peaceful days without war. But pain and loss continue to weigh heavily on the people of the northern borders. She paused and then added, "We could completely finish off the Xiongnu, but the emperor in the capital always withdraws the troops at the last minute. Do you know why? He says there is not enough budget, not enough military power. It is truly ridiculous. There is money to build palaces and hold banquets, but when it comes to fighting the enemy, there is none. Do you know, one banquet in the palace is enough to feed 1,000 soldiers for a month. It is truly unfair." She laughed loudly, then continued, "Why must matters that can be solved with money be paid for with human lives, from one generation to the next?" I listened, feeling the deep fatigue and sadness in her words. Memories of the capital and what I witnessed here made me only able to pat her gently on the shoulder. Are they any different from the emperor? In the end, it is still the people who have to endure everything. I do not understand court politics, and I do not want to understand. I only manage the matters before my eyes. Valerie, you have worked hard. Please rest a little. I called Amber to help her leave, then held the pen, standing silently in the warehouse. Drops of ink fell onto the ledger, black as the night. Huyang City was about to fall. The blood on the city walls had soaked wet, then dried then wet again. At first, there were people trying to clean it, but by now, no one had time to care. Anyone with a shred of strength had gone up to the walls to fight. Bodies lay scattered along the stairs. Most were citizens, some were Xiongnu soldiers. Broken sword fragments looked like flowers blooming on the city walls. The firelight from the city gate cast shadows, and shouts echoed everywhere. In the medical center, Amber gripped my sleeve tightly, whispering anxiously, "Madam, let's go. We have done our best. Our duty is fulfilled. Let's go." I turned back to look at the wounded soldiers lying bandaged on the beds. They were all looking at me. Among them were children helping because the medical center lacked manpower. Amber's voice was not loud, but in this quiet scene, everyone heard it clearly. "Sister Princess Consort, has the city been breached?" A little boy lying next to his mother asked, trembling. At this point, there was nothing left to hide. I nodded slightly. The crowd suddenly burst into tears. The mournful cries echoed, weighing heavily on my heart, leaving me speechless. The wounded soldiers lying there remained silent for a moment, then suddenly tried to stand up. They stumbled toward their swords. Their newly bandaged wounds tore open, blood gushing out. An older soldier smiled weakly, looking at me, and said, "Princess Consort, you are the best princess consort I have ever met. You have done too much for us. You go. Go now." I looked at the honest faces in the medical center. Even in such a desperate situation, they still smiled to comfort me. A wave of strong emotion surged in my heart, and tears could not help but fall. What virtue or talent did I possess to be treated with such kindness? These were the people of the northern borders whom the capital called barbaric borderlanders, yet I saw in them resilience and a fierce vitality, ready to sacrifice everything for their homeland. People often said the people of the northern borders were as hard as stone. But now, in my eyes, those sitting enjoying themselves in the palace amidst singing and feasting were the ones who were truly cold. I took a few steps forward, taking the sword from Paul's hand, and gently patted the boy's head. "Good boy, you are still young." Paul was the son of a physician in the medical center, only 10 years old this year. All day long, he liked to run after me, calling me sister. "Amber," I called out. "Madam." Amber seemed to understand something. Tears overflowed as her voice trembled. In the medical center, all children under 12 years old withdraw immediately. "Amber, take the children away." I gripped the sword in my hand. "No, sister, I won't go. I want to stay with my parents." Paul sensed something and cried out, sobbing. The sound of weeping echoed throughout the medical center, painful and sorrowful. "Listen to me," I spoke decisively. "Your uncles and neighbors have all sacrificed for this city. You are the last bloodline of Huyang. If you die, everything will end. You must survive, understand? Paul, normally you are the leader of the children. Now, sister assigns you a mission: lead the surviving younger ones out of here." Paul tried to suppress his crying, pursed his lips, and nodded. The physician couple also stepped forward, stroking Paul's head, and said, "Son, we people of the northern borders are resilient. Mom and Dad trust you." Paul threw himself into his parents' arms, sobbing. There was not much time left. After the brief farewell, I ordered Amber to take everyone away. "Leave through the back gate. Be careful." Before parting, I removed the jade hairpin from my head and placed it in Amber's hair. I fear I will not be able to see the day you get married. I originally intended to give you a glorious wedding. Now, consider this hairpin my wedding gift to you. Amber, survive and take care of these children. You know that place, right? Amber bit her lip, large tears streaming down endlessly. Go. Hurry up. I wiped away tears for her and urged her. Amber bit her lip tightly to suppress her tears, then led the children away. The remaining people in the medical center were silent, no one asked where they were going. I turned back to look at everyone in the medical center and forced a smile. Everyone, let's take action. The medical center was located deep within the city. The people of the northern borders naturally had extensive military experience. Along with some experienced soldiers, we came up with a simple plan, but time was too short to do much. Everyone had determined they would sacrifice themselves. This was just to kill a few more Xiongnu. I also knew clearly that I would die. The Xiongnu arrived very quickly. Perhaps because this was just a medical center with nothing important, the army sent here did not have many soldiers. Little Tian, a scout injured in the arm, retreated to act as a lookout. When he realized the Xiongnu army was approaching, he immediately signaled. First, we attacked them with a type of anesthetic drug, specially prepared by the physician. Then, everyone rushed out simultaneously to kill the enemy. This was the first time I had killed someone. Although the opponent had inhaled the drug and his limbs were limp, my first sword strike still trembled and was inaccurate. I aimed for the neck, but I slashed the shoulder instead. Perhaps the pain woke him up. I saw the Xiongnu man's blue eyes light up with hatred. He raised his knife to slash me, but Alak saved me. Alak's sword cut the man's throat. Blood splattered on my face. Alak said nothing, turned and rushed at another enemy. At that moment, I realized that the blood of the Xiongnu people was also hot. I looked at the person who had just fallen, thinking that, amidst the scene of slaughter, only screams echoed around. I gritted my teeth, ceaselessly swinging my sword, feeling absolutely no pain even though my body was covered in wounds. But after all, I was a woman raised in gentle care. My strength gradually faded. When I saw a Xiongnu rushing toward me with red eyes, slashing straight at my face, I no longer had the strength to dodge. I knew I was about to die. What was the feeling? The answer was no feeling at all. In that moment, my mind was blank. I just stood looking, motionless. Suddenly, an arrow shot from behind hit the Xiongnu man right in the heart. He fell down in front of me, and over his shoulder, I saw a set of silver armor shining under the sun. Looking up, I saw Harrison drawing his bow. The sunlight illuminating him made him look like a god. The northern army flooded in from behind him, raising their swords and spears to sweep away the Xiongnu in the city. In that moment, amidst the joy, my heart suddenly felt relieved. The sounds of weeping mixed with the roar of battle filled the sky. I felt my chest gradually lighten, but at that same moment, a wave of exhaustion surged like a great tide. My vision went dark, my legs went soft, and I fell into a pair of solid arms. When I woke up, the sky was already dark. Amber was resting her head on the edge of my bed, her eyes swollen from crying. Why are you crying? How is the situation in the city? Are the children safe? I tried to force a weak smile and asked. Seeing me awake, Amber's eyes immediately lit up. She hurriedly wiped the tears from her face and said, "Everything is fine. The children are safe too." The prince led the northern army to defeat the Xiongnu and captured tens of thousands of prisoners. The Xiongnu have completely failed. From now on, peaceful. I was dazed for a moment before I could react, blurting out. The Xiongnu failed. Yes, madam. Amber replied. After you were brought back, the prince led the army to sweep away the remnants of the Xiongnu forces. Madame Valerie said no one understands the situation on the steppe better than the prince. Years ago, he risked his life to scout alone for 2 years. 3 days have passed, perhaps he is about to return. 3 days. I opened my eyes wide in surprise. Have I slept that long? The physician said you were exhausted from the past few days and had burned out your energy. You kept sleeping and wouldn't wake up, which made me very worried. Amber sighed in relief, though a trace of fear remained in her voice. Are you hungry, madam? There is still warm porridge in the kitchen. Let me bring some up for you. Although I was awake, I had to stay in bed for another 2 days before I could stand up. When I walked outside, I saw the desolate scene everywhere in Huyang City. Although it had been cleaned up, the ruined walls and bloodstains remaining in the crevices of the stones could not be washed away. The people had lost their loved ones, and although they still carried a look of sorrow, when they heard that the Xiongnu were defeated, and the border would be peaceful from now on. Their faces gradually brightened. Paul. Suddenly, Paul ran out from somewhere and jumped into my arms, looking up and smiling brightly at me. The people around, who previously hadn't paid much attention to me, now came over to greet me. Their faces blossomed with sincere smiles. Princess consort, princess consort. I smiled and greeted everyone back, then walked to the medical center. After the great battle, the medical center was always crowded with wounded soldiers. No matter how many people there were, it was not enough. Feeling I couldn't just stand by and watch, I joined Amber in continuing our treatment work. Fortunately, medicine and necessary supplies had been fully provided, so we no longer had to worry about those things. Half a month later, while I was changing dressing for a wounded soldier at the medical center, I suddenly heard a loud noise outside. Before I could send Amber out to check, I heard the cheers of the crowd. Great victory! Great victory! The Northern Army has returned. The Northern Army has returned. My lord, my lord! I immediately stood up and looked up toward the source of the sound. The wounded soldiers lying on the ground also showed clear joy on their faces. Madame Valerie ran anxiously around the medical center as if looking for something. When she saw me, she immediately walked over quickly. Why are you still standing here? I am changing dressing for the wounded. If I am not here, where else would I be? I couldn't help but retort. Are you done yet? Madame Valerie looked down at the wounded soldier. Before I could answer, the patient on the ground hurriedly replied. Done. Done. If it is done, then follow me. Madame Valerie said as she pulled my hand and dragged me outside. Where are we going? I asked. Your husband is back. Aren't you going to meet him? Madame Valerie said bluntly, making me freeze. It wasn't because of anything else but simply because of the phrase. Your husband. On their tall horses, the soldiers of the Northern Army were all exhausted after long days of fighting. Everyone's face showed the weathering of the wind and sand, but they still held their heads high, joyfully accepting the congratulations of all the people. Everyone who could still walk had poured out onto both sides of the road to welcome them. Leading the army, riding on a white horse, was none other than Harrison. He had lost a lot of weight. A faint layer of green stubble appeared on his chin. Although his lips were pressed tight, not revealing emotion, I could still recognize that he was very happy. Seeing him like this, I suddenly remembered that spring years ago, when the border won a great victory, and he was summoned to the capital to receive a reward. That day, he also rode a tall horse, wearing silver armor. Though he was sparse with words, from the corners of his eyes to his brows, he exuded the majestic spirit of youth. In that very moment, he had stirred the hearts of countless young girls. Regrettably, that young man already had someone in his heart. When the army approached the medical center, suddenly, the people around seemed to have agreed beforehand and simultaneously made way for me. Madame Valerie from B gave me a push. Go on. Taken by surprise, I inadvertently stood right in front of everyone. Harrison looked toward me, just slightly pulled the reins, then immediately jumped off the horse. He walked toward me, his eyes shining brightly. I didn't understand his meaning, and could only bow my head and whisper, My lord, congratulations on the great victory. Before I could finish my sentence, I was swept up into his arms. I couldn't help but let out a small cry of surprise. Around us, happy laughter and cheers rang out. Harrison placed me on the horse, then quickly climbed up behind me, wrapping his arms tightly around my waist. He urged the horse forward, and the cheering became even louder. I knew that laughter carried no malice, but my face still flushed red with embarrassment. I turned my head slightly and whispered, My lord, put me down. This is not proper etiquette. Harrison chuckled softly, a warm, deep laugh emanating from his throat. He said, Vivi, do not refuse. Look around, everyone is congratulating you. You deserve it. His breath brushed against my neck, warm and moist. We won. From now on, the northern borders will no longer have war. No more wandering people, no more scenes of old fathers sending off sons, wives sending off husbands, or young children sending off fathers to battle. The northern borders will be as peaceful as the capital. He whispered in my ear, his voice full of joy but also hiding a deep nostalgia. I turned back to look into his eyes. The Chen family had been loyal to the northern borders for 5 generations, hundreds had fallen. Even the spirit hall of the northern borders didn't have enough space to place all their spirit tablets, and now, the 100-year war had ended at the hands of Harrison. In that moment, my heart softened. The man before me, though not a perfect husband, was truly a great general. On his shoulders rested the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers and people of the northern borders. How many times late at night had I brought him soup, watching him silently contemplate before the war map, the flickering lamp casting his lonely shadow, heartbreakingly solitary. That is right, it is all over. I sighed gently in admiration. The army continued its journey, taking us back to the Chen estate. Harrison dismounted, conveniently lifted me down, and walked with me into the estate. Hot water had already been prepared for him. He went into the bathroom, while I went down to the kitchen to prepare a meal. A bowl of steaming hot mutton noodles was already set on the table. But after waiting for a long time without seeing him come out, the noodles had cooled until the fat congealed. I told Amber to take the bowl of noodles to heat up again, then walked to the bathroom. I knocked on the door but heard no movement. After thinking for a moment, I pushed the door open and walked in. Amidst the misty steam, Harrison leaned his head back, fast asleep in the bathtub. On his naked body were countless scars, both deep and shallow. I quietly stepped out and called the soldiers to help. When I woke up, it was already midnight. I was leaning on a soft chair. Hearing a noise, I opened my drowsy eyes and saw a figure. He gently pressed my shoulder to lie down. "Vivi, just keep sleeping," he whispered, then opened the door and stepped out. The wind moved the curtains, and the aroma of mutton soup wafted into the room. I couldn't sleep anymore, so I put on my fox fur coat and walked out. In the courtyard, Amber was hurriedly bringing food to Harrison. Seeing me walk out, she asked in surprise, "Princess consort, our?" Harrison had just swallowed a mouthful of hot soup. He turned and said, "Did I wake you up?" "No," I replied. "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat something?" I walked over and sat beside him. Amber listened to him and hurriedly ran out to get bowls and chopsticks. In the room, only he and I remained. The firelight flickered. I looked at his gaunt face, momentarily not knowing what to say. Harrison glanced at me, then broke the silence first. "Vivi, how is the situation in Huiyang City?" "Currently, the city is temporarily stable. However, when the army besieged it, many people fell. Now the people's spirits are relatively stable, but repairing the city and caring for the wounded and civilians still need attention." The officials have started taking inventory. They will handle this. "There is one more thing I must tell you." I bit my lip lightly, feeling a bit shy. "What is it?" he asked. I hesitated, then recounted the whole story of leading people to the Hu family to take medicine when the situation was critical. I worried he would be angry or uncomfortable, but unexpectedly, his eyes showed a smile. "So you must help me," I quickly added. Harrison laughed and replied, "You are quite brave. Were you not afraid something might happen when you went?" "Afraid, of course." I raised my hands helplessly. In the medical center full of wounded soldiers waiting to be saved, even if afraid, I had to go. "You have worked hard," he said softly. "Compared to what we did, your work is truly not insignificant." "Now that the war is peaceful," I asked, "so, what do you plan to do next?" Amber hadn't returned yet. I was thirsty, so I poured myself a cup and drank slowly. That question wasn't too difficult, but he remained silent for a long time, took a sip of wine, then replied, "I haven't thought about it yet. Defeating the Xiongnu so they dare not set foot in Great Xia again has been the wish of the Chen family since my grandfather's time. Over the years, I have devoted all my time to that. The battlefield is fierce, no one knows when they will die. I haven't thought about the future. No rush, there is still plenty of time." I smiled, then looked around. Seeing Amber still hadn't returned, I stood up. "Let me go see. Why haven't they brought the things in yet?" I opened the door and saw Amber and Auntie Wang sneaking around outside, carrying a tray of hot soup. Seeing me, both jumped, nearly spilling all the food. "Give that to me." I gave a faint smile, looking at Amber. Following my gaze, she bowed her head, shrinking back, daring not look straight at me, only smiling awkwardly. I glanced at her once, then took the items. When I turned back, I saw Harrison smiling. "Nuff yet?" I asked. "Nuff," he replied. It seemed that with the major tasks completed, he had been much more relaxed. Not long after the meal, Harrison fell into a deep sleep again. I sat on the soft chair all night without closing my eyes. Just 3 days after Harrison returned, a decree from the capital arrived at the Chen estate. The content, besides the usual praises, mainly summoned Harrison and the generals back to the capital to receive rewards. 3 days later, on a beautiful morning, Harrison and I sat together in a carriage, departing for the capital. Eunuch Harold, having just recovered from a serious illness, sat alone in a carriage behind. After all, the fatigue of many days was not easily recovered quickly. Throughout the journey, Harrison spent most of the time resting, occasionally reading some news from Huiyang City and the capital. Half a month later, the convoy arrived at the capital. Citizens gathered at the city gate to welcome them. Harrison, wearing his characteristic silver armor, received congratulations from all over the city. Although the whole capital knew he had a wife, young girls still stole flowers and fruits from gardens to offer him. Sitting in the carriage, I lifted the curtains slightly and looked out, seeing a young girl throw a flower. But she missed, and the flower fell into the carriage. Her face flushed red, her eyes looking at Harrison with fervor. I picked up the flower, handed it to Amber, then leaned against the carriage wall to rest. Having only left the capital for a few months, upon returning, a feeling of discomfort rose in my heart, like a rope tied around my neck. Harrison did not return to the estate, he went to the palace immediately. Amber helped me out of the carriage. The steward and the servants in the estate had come out to welcome us early. What was special was that concubine Lucy was also present, wearing a magnificent fox fur outfit, a bright red gemstone hairpin on her head, looking extremely arrogant. It seemed her outside business had prospered quite a bit. In the estate, she and I were not incompatible like fire and water, but cold as ice and frost. The Chen estate was large, so there was no friction between us. Only occasionally did some rumors from outside seep in. Once, I called the servants in the estate to discipline them right in front of her. Only then did things calm down. After hearing me recount this, Harrison immediately expelled all the troublemakers. Even though concubine Lucy cried and begged, it was useless. "Sister, where is the prince?" Concubine Lucy hurriedly walked closer and asked, her face showing clear worry. "He went to the palace," I replied indifferently. After hearing these words, concubine Lucy immediately lost interest, lazily letting her little maid, Holly, support her to walk back. I was long used to her behavior like this, paying it no mind. Only instructing the steward. "Bring all the estate's account books from the past days here." These days, quite a few matters had accumulated in the estate. By the time I heard the steward's final report, the sky had begun to darken. Thinking about the big banquet in the palace today, surely he had drunk quite a bit of wine. I instructed the kitchen to prepare sobering soup, then told Amber to serve plain rice. In the estate, I always ate simply 3 dishes and a soup. Because I was too tired, I lay down to rest early. At midnight, hearing some movement outside, I put on a coat and stood up. Just as I stepped out, I saw Harrison walk in, reeking of alcohol. The nannies and young maids keeping watch around all showed surprise, and somewhere there was even joy. Everyone knew that since the wedding night when I first married into the estate, Harrison had stormed out. Since then, most of the time, things were just perfunctory. Seeing his current appearance, he would likely stay tonight. The moral principles of the 3 bonds and 5 virtues had bound women in family compounds for hundreds of years. The concept of, follow your husband once married, had never changed. A woman not favored by her husband, no matter how excellent she was, would suffer much gossip behind her back. Therefore, seeing Harrison return on the first night, how could the nannies and maids in the courtyard not be happy? After all, no one dislikes their master being treated better. Amber looked at me with a bit of worry. I pursed my lips, looking at him with complicated eyes. Reason told me I could not refuse his staying, but deep in my heart, I was still somewhat unwilling. I respected his dedication to the country, admired his knowledge, and even had a flutter of emotion. But regrettably, the time we met was not right. Like planting sunflowers in autumn, winter would never see flowers bloom. Thinking of my parents at home, I could not refuse at this time. Breathing a light sigh, I waved my hand to tell Amber to bring sobering soup for the prince. "No hurry. First prepare water. This prince wants to bath," Harrison spoke. Amber glanced at me, then responded. Although he didn't come often, I still fully prepared his clothes here. As a wife, I never neglected what needed to be done. Sitting before the table, I stared blankly at the moonlight outside the window. The moonlight pierced through the thin silk curtains, shining on the cold tiled floor, creating a lonely shadow. I was used to being alone. Tonight, suddenly having another person felt a bit unfamiliar. When Harrison stepped out, the alcohol had somewhat dissipated. Amber brought the sobering soup. He drank it all in one breath. A look from him forced Amber, who intentionally lingered, to withdraw. Amber looked at me with grievance, but I signaled for her to leave. The clothes fit very well. Fitting is good. I pulled the coat over my shoulders, trying to find some words. Harrison returned to the estate but didn't go over there. I predict there will be movement from that place soon. Did you meet the Empress Dowager? She was very worried about you during the days there was no news of you. After the banquet, the Empress Dowager kept me at the Palace of Benevolent Peace and said a lot. This time, the great victory over the Songnu completely ended the war on the northern border. 5 parts strategy, 5 parts luck. Surviving and returning is truly a blessing. Was Wanyan's youngest son being kidnapped intentional? I asked curiously. No, he replied. It was just pushing the boat with the current. Wanyan truly loved his youngest son, even wanting to put him on the throne of the great Khan. How could his older brothers be willing? This time, the massacre happened so boldly. It also had the assistance of a brother. Harrison laughed coldly, his eyes revealing an indescribable look. Power is a fine wine, but also a poison, fragrant yet full of deadly temptation. Not only the Xiongnu on the steppe, even the Great Sha court is no exception. Since the emperor fell seriously ill a while ago, the situation has become even more confusing. It is said the emperor intends to pass the throne to the 13th prince, the youngest son. My father is currently the crown prince's grand tutor, at the center of power, unable to withdraw. I felt a headache. Even if only to allow my father to retreat safely, I couldn't help but maintain a good relationship with him. It feels cold being high up. Harrison suddenly glanced at me, dropping a sentence without head or tail. Just as I was about to speak, I heard the sound I had long expected, Nanny Zhao's voice calling. Amber truly understood my heart. Usually she would block her, but today she directly brought the person in. Nanny Zhao lifted the curtain and walked straight toward Harrison. Over the years, after a few times I secretly disciplined her, she had become much more obedient, at least knowing to bow. Greetings, my lord, princess consort. Nanny Zhao curtsied, but her eyes stared intently at him. I was in a very good mood, smiling faintly as I asked. Nanny Zhao coming here in the middle of the night, is something wrong? Could it be that concubine Lucy is unwell? That was an old trick, but with Harrison, it was effective. Concubine Lucy is fine. It is just that hearing the news that the prince was injured at the border, she was extremely worried in her heart, unable to eat or sleep well. But as soon as the prince entered the city, he went to the palace and she couldn't meet him. Now, hearing the prince has returned, concubine Lucy specially sent this old servant to inquire. As Nanny Zhao spoke, she cautiously observed Harrison's expression. Normally, at this time, he should have stood up to go see her, but he didn't move at all, only saying indifferently, "Go back and tell concubine Lucy that this prince is safe and sound." Nanny Zhao paused. After a moment of hesitation she probed further. Concubine Lucy waited from early morning until dark today. I know. Tell her to rest early. Harrison replied. Tonight, this prince will stay at the main courtyard. As soon as these words left his mouth, Nanny Zhao's pupils contracted. Even I couldn't control my expression in time. Harrison noticed that, and though his expression remained unchanged, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Is there anything else? He asked. No, nothing more. Nanny Zhao replied. It is late, the prince and princess consort should also rest. Having said this much, Nanny Zhao also understood Harrison's personality clearly and dared not say more. But when she left, her face was pale. Concubine Lucy was not like me, having a solid family background as support. Even if Harrison didn't like me, he couldn't treat me too badly. Concubine Lucy's entire status in the estate depended on him. If she lost his favor, even if I did nothing, just the rumors from the people in the estate would be enough to drown her. Over the years, her excessive ostentation in the estate had also caused dissatisfaction among many people. It is not early anymore, rest, Harrison said gently. My body suddenly stiffened. The smile on my lips looked like crying. He laughed softly, said nothing more, went into the room first and lay on the bed. Seeing me crawling in slowly like a cat, shrinking into the quilt, trying my best to keep a distance from him. Although we had been husband and wife for many years, I was still unfamiliar with him in some aspects. When the light went out, my heart beat fast to the rhythm. An arm reached closer. Harrison pressed close, his gentle breath falling on my ear, his voice soft. I am sorry. Over the years, I have let you suffer many grievances. Now that the war is over, from now on, I will make it up to you. Sleep peacefully. I know you do not want to, but I am willing to wait until the day you are willing. Sleep early. Tomorrow I will take you to a place. Saying that, he withdrew his hand. I breathed a sigh of relief, only glancing at him once, then quickly turned away. Even though Harrison did nothing, even promised, having a person lying next to me still made me unaccustomed. I was drowsy until nearly morning before I could catch a little sleep. There were too many thoughts in my heart, so the sleep wasn't deep. The next morning when I woke up, Amber helped me with makeup, but my spirits weren't very good. Madam. Amber hesitated. I understood her meaning but only said, "It is nothing. The prince just ordered someone to bring the horses." Amber said. "Said he wants to take Madame out, but doesn't want anyone else to follow." "Where are the two of you going?" Amber frowned and asked. "I do not know either," I replied. "He only mentioned it last night. If he's bringing horses, it must be far." As I spoke, I yawned and replied drowsily. "Right. Since we are going out, just do a simple hairstyle. Choose clothes convenient for movement. Simple and elegant is fine. I guess we are not visiting anyone." "Yes." Amber listened and immediately changed her movements, tying a simple bun at the back of my head, then attaching a magnolia hairpin to secure it. Although the war had ended, Harrison still hadn't abandoned the habit of practicing martial arts early in the morning. When he returned, it was just in time for breakfast. While we were eating, someone from the fragrant courtyard sent a servant to invite him again, but Harrison had his men send them away. After eating, Harrison picked up a copy of Travel Notes from the Mountains, which I had read before, and sat on the bed to rest. Flipping through the book for a while, I sat next to him, also holding a book, but I couldn't read it at all. I only stole glances at him from the corner of my eye. The feeling was strange. Even though we had gone through many things together, and after returning from Huyang City, our relationship was somewhat closer than before, there was still an invisible barrier between us that couldn't be broken. Since returning to the capital, after he went to the palace once, everything had changed. Actually, I didn't mind the previous lifestyle. Compared to other men who favored concubines and destroyed their wives, he was truly very good. He gave me all the respect I deserved. The peace in the fragrant courtyard was largely due to Harrison's control and restraint. Perhaps I should find time to enter the palace and talk to the Empress Dowager. I believed I could hear something from her. "Are you done resting?" His words pulled me out of my thoughts. "Can we go?" I nodded. It turned out he was waiting for me to finish resting. The horses were prepared in front of the estate gate. Harrison led me out. His white horse, Snowy, stood in front of the door, stomping its hooves in boredom. When it saw me, it immediately lowered its head toward me. I stroked its head and laughed softly. Compared to communicating with humans, animals were much more sincere. Harrison laughed, not waiting for me to climb up. He skillfully lifted me and placed me on the saddle, then swung himself onto the horse behind me, his movements agile and decisive. The servants standing in front of the estate gate were all smiling. Just as Harrison pulled the reins preparing to depart, a frail figure stumbled out from the estate. Concubine Lucy didn't need anyone to support her. She just looked at me sitting on the horse, her eyes immediately changing. "My lord." Concubine Lucy spoke. Harrison looked down at her, but didn't dismount, asking, "Is something wrong?" "Nothing major. I just heard the news that the prince had returned, but I hadn't come out to welcome you in time." Her big, round, glistening eyes looked up at Harrison expectantly, combined with her ivory white outfit, truly making people feel pity. I tilted my head to look at Harrison. If it were before, he would surely have dismounted to comfort her, but now he didn't react much, only lowering his eyelids indifferently and saying, "Well, now you have met me. It is cold today, your body is weak, so go back and rest early." Having spoken, he didn't wait for Concubine Lucy to speak, immediately ordering someone to take her back. Concubine Lucy stood rooted to the spot, seemingly not expecting to be treated like this. Her eyes immediately turned gloomy. I looked at her, but my heart couldn't generate a shred of sympathy. Yesterday, from the steward's mouth, I learned that since I left, without me to hinder her, the prince's estate had become her domain. Everyone knew she was the person the prince loved, so no one dared to provoke her. During the time Concubine Lucy was sick, her distant cousin caused trouble in the capital not a few times, seizing civilian women, occupying people's land, and buying shops on the street at cheap prices. However, because Harrison was busy fighting the Xiongnu, news hadn't been transmitted back, but in the capital, not a few petitions had been submitted for impeachment. I truly didn't understand what she needed so much money for. The love and pampering Harrison gave her were clear to everyone. With Harrison here, she would have enough for a lifetime, even living better than many others. Greed without limits is a sin. The servants standing there had gloomy faces, their eyes looking at Concubine Lucy also changed somewhat. I said nothing. Snowy waited somewhat impatiently. Harrison gently tugged the reins, and the horse immediately galloped away. Reaching the main avenue in the city, he still controlled the speed, but once out of the city gate, Snowy rushed north, the wind whistling past my ears. Harrison's solid body pressed close behind, radiating warmth. Snowy galloped all the way to the foot of Mount Putuo, only slowing down then. Before our eyes was a narrow path paved with green stone, surrounded by lush green weeds that had just sprouted. Snowy seemed very familiar with this place. After dismounting, we just walked up the path. I secretly felt lucky that I had prepared in advance, wearing simple clothes. Harrison's face was solemn, as if on a pilgrimage, holding a sword to clear the way, cutting down the weeds blocking the path. I vaguely sensed that the place we were going to today was not an ordinary place, so I remained silent, asking nothing more, only following step by step behind him. After more than half an hour, we finally reached the destination. I was so tired my legs were numb, standing in place to rest. Before my eyes was a steep cliff. Below the mountain was a sunken valley. Inside the valley, grass and trees were lush, and many wooden markers were scattered everywhere. Seeing Harrison reveal a hint of sadness and melancholy, he whispered, "Let's go, we are going down." I nodded. He immediately held my hand tightly. Reflexively, I wanted to pull my hand back, but after a moment of hesitation, I decided to let it be. Snowy, usually jumping around happily, was now unusually quiet, stepping down into the valley step by step. Every step was truly solemn. Looking down from above was different. When walking into the valley, I realized the wooden markers were all engraved with names. The damp earth was mixed with rotting swords and axes. Instead of calling this place a valley, perhaps calling it a desolate graveyard would be more accurate. Harrison lowered the bundle from Snowy's back, bowed his head, and said, "This is the cemetery of the Northern Army. Soldiers whose relatives cannot be found, we keep their personal belongings and bury them here. The ancestor of the Chen family also rests in this place." "Vivi, do you know how to cook?" he asked. I nodded, guessing somewhat what he wanted to do. When I opened the bundle, inside were rice, meat, along with cooking utensils like knives and pots, and on top was a bundle of red incense. Harrison immediately set up a stove and looked for firewood around. I took the rice, put it in the pot, and brought it to the stream to wash. When I reached the stream, I saw Snowy standing next to a wooden marker, rubbing its face against it lingeringly. I walked closer and glanced at the marker, engraved with names like Chasing Wind, Seizing Cloud, Black Sky. The marker was rotten, I could only see a few faint strokes. Many other names had also faded over time. I patted Snowy's head gently and left it there. After washing the rice and vegetables, I returned. Harrison finished digging the stove, and a flickering fire had risen. I put the pot of water on the stove, then found a flat stone to start cutting vegetables and meat. It would be a while before the rice was cooked. I had prepared everything, just waiting for the rice to cook to stir fry. Harrison brought 2 jars of wine. He took out 1 jar and gave it to me. "Vivi, come with me." I said nothing more, just followed him. The valley hadn't been visited for a long time, boulders were scattered, and weeds grew wildly. He led me under a large, lush tree, then opened the lid of the wine jar and said softly, "The Chen family on the battlefield, the ashes of those who fall are all buried here." Then, he spoke solemnly. "Grandfather, grandmother, father, mother. Harrison, on behalf of my wife Vivian, pays respects. The Xiongnu have been defeated. The northern border is peaceful. The Chen family's wish has been fulfilled. You can rest in peace now." I had anticipated this in my heart, so I bowed respectfully. Daughter-in-law Vivian pays respects to grandfather, grandmother, father, and mother. Harrison lifted the wine jar and poured it slowly onto the large tree trunk. Then he knelt down and kowtowed several times heavily. I also knelt behind, bowing my head with him. I had no objection or hesitation about this. The Chen family deserved their sacrifice. Harrison stood up, pulled me closer, and sat down on the rock under the tree. At this moment, he seemed to have shed the burden of a powerful general, the authority of a prince of the northern borders. Looking like a child loving his family, murmuring about the years that had passed to the resting place of the Chen family, listening to him recount calmly the dangerous experiences in battle, I couldn't help but be horrified. Indeed, I had been protected very well. The chaotic battles I experienced in Huiyang City, compared to him, were now just child's play. He talked for a long time before stopping, staring intently at the burial place for a long while before turning to look at me and asking, "Waiting long, right?" I shook my head slightly. "No, I am not in a hurry." He nodded. "It has been a long time since I came here. I will spend a little more time with my parents. Their wish is fulfilled, there will be plenty of time later. The rice is probably done, let's go back." Saying that, he stood up and naturally took my hand. Walking halfway, he suddenly asked, "Vivi, aren't you curious why the Chen family's burial place is here? Shouldn't there be tombstones on Mount Bating?" If I remembered correctly, the ancestors of the Chen family were granted graves by the emperor near the imperial mausoleum, with caretakers. He laughed softly. Those things are just for outsiders to see. Instead of lying solemnly for others to offer incense and worship, the ancestors of the Chen family still wanted to be with the soldiers who fought alongside them. We came from here, and ultimately returned to this place. Harrison picked a bright yellow flower and conveniently pinned it in my hair. When we reach 100 years old, we will also rest in this place. I remained silent, not replying. The image of concubine Lucy with her elegant figure appeared in my mind again, causing complicated thoughts to rise in my heart. I knew he wanted to open up to me, but could we walk together for 100 years? When we approached the stove, the rice in the pot was cooked. I rolled up my sleeves and started frying the vegetables. Harrison burned incense and went around the valley planting incense in many places. A pot of white rice, a small plate of vegetables, plus a jar of wine. Finally, Harrison left 3 sticks of incense planted in front of the food and wine, then respectfully poured wine and said a few words. Just finishing the task, he called Snowy. Snowy's hoofbeats broke the silence of the valley. The work was completed. We led the horse slowly away. Behind us was the sound of the wind rustling like cheers of joy. When stepping onto the cliff, a blinding ray of sunlight pierced my eyes. The weather is truly beautiful. I narrowed my eyes, looking at the sun hanging in the sky, and said, it is a beautiful day. Harrison smiled. His smile, after shedding the burden, was truly beautiful. Snowy neighed joyfully, leading the way, seemingly urging us. The way down the mountain seemed easier than the way up. Soon, he and I rode Snowy back. The wind blew whistling past my ears like the sound of my heartbeat. Just arriving at the Chen estate, immediately news of concubine Lucy having a heart attack came from the fragrant courtyard. This trick was no longer new, but as long as it worked, it was still used. I dismounted, my skirt soaked with night dew, looking up at him. In front was Nanny Zhao from the fragrant courtyard, looking at Harrison with expectant eyes. He looked down at me, gently took my hand, and said, Vivi, I will go over there for a while. When I return, I will explain everything clearly to you. There are some special things between me and concubine Lucy. My lord, just go. No need to worry about me. I smiled but didn't reveal emotion on my face. Amber, standing next to me, couldn't help but curl her lip, her face clearly showing disdain. Once everyone had left, I patted her arm gently, reminding her. What did you just do? Have you forgotten all the words I taught you about gestures and speech? Amber pursed her lips, trying to endure, but finally couldn't help asking, Madam, what does the prince mean, exactly? Clearly the fragrant courtyard is pretending. Why does the prince believe it? True or false, is that important? As long as the person the prince wants to believe, then it becomes the truth. So what about the prince towards Madam? What does he really mean? Amber's voice carried indignation. I sighed softly. Amber, you grew up with me since childhood. You should understand that this world is unfair to women. Men being unfaithful is commonplace. Feelings of wholehearted devotion like my parents loving only one person in a lifetime, that is rare. Having it is happiness, but not having it is not a loss. My words were too private to let others hear. A few maids were about to approach to bow to me, but I waved my hand to signal them to stay away. Amber stepped forward to support my hand. Madam, we climbed the mountain too long. Finally, I am tired. I looked closely at Amber's face, suddenly realizing the little girl who followed me all this time had grown up graceful. Unable to help myself, I smiled. Look closely, our Amber has also grown up. Is there anyone in your heart yet? Madam, do not tease this servant. Amber blushed, her eyes starting to avoid mine. I wiped the smile from my lips, then spoke seriously. Amber, I am telling the truth. If nothing unexpected happens, my life will probably be like this. But you are different. You grew up with me, and I truly hope you find happiness. Although this world is unfair to women, the important thing is to preserve one's body and dignity. Fortunately, I, your mistress, also have a bit of power in this world. You can freely choose. As long as it is not royalty, I guarantee that man will never dare to bully you for a lifetime, and you will have a fulfilling, happy life. No, this servant does not want to marry. This servant wants to stay by Madam's side for a lifetime. Amber heard this and immediately worried, continuously saying, Silly girl, what for staying with me? Do you think if you marry, you have to be far from me? We can still be together. I patted her hand to comfort her. That will never happen. Amber's eyes were almost teary. This servant does not want to marry. This servant wants to stay by Madam's side for a lifetime. Madam is clearly such a good person, why is it like this? Speaking of this, it is truly unreasonable. Watch your words. I shook my head slightly, raising a finger to my lips to signal. Speaking fairly, he is just like any other man in the world. It is just that you set your expectations too high. After all, marrying him, he hasn't treated me badly. Everything deserving respect, he has given me fully. If anyone dares to mock me, he will stand up to protect me, even bringing a sword to their door to demand justice. Now, even Madam Lee has to make way when she meets me. But madam, do you not feel regret? Amber asked, her voice full of dissatisfaction. Regret what? I calmed down, looked at her, and said, love is inherently a precious and rare thing. No need to force it. Even when truly loving, people can still have a change of heart. So, madam, do you think the prince truly loves concubine Lucy? Amber hesitated and asked. I was surprised for a moment. Why ask that? This servant does not know, just a feeling. Amber replied. Frowning, I laughed. Who knows? Perhaps it is so. When returning to the main courtyard, I ordered someone to prepare bathwater. After the meal, I lazily leaned back in the chair, holding a newly published poetry collection, flipping through the pages casually. I didn't know when I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was already lying on the bed. Beside me were a pair of solid legs. Looking up, I saw Harrison leaning against the headboard, reading a book, watching over me. You are awake? He asked. Is it late? How is it? I leaned on my hand, trying to sit up. It has only been a quarter of an hour. Nothing is wrong, you can sleep a bit more. Harrison said, pulling the blanket over me. I didn't want to get up either. Amber's words still echoed in my head, making me think about the relationship between him and me. I knew I needed to find an occasion to clarify things. Finally I spoke up. My lord, how is concubine Lucy's condition? How is it? He replied. Initially it might have been real, but now it is uncertain. Harrison put the book down, smiled faintly, and said, You know it well too, don't you? Isn't it because I indulged her? I lay back down, replying gently, My lord, you are indulging her, aren't you? Perhaps hearing the sarcasm in my sentence, he looked at me with a hint of a smile in his eyes. Between me and concubine Lucy. I didn't answer, just cast my eyes elsewhere, thinking in my heart, then how else could it be? He spoke slowly. Concubine Lucy is not surnamed Liu, but originally should be surnamed Zhang. She is the last orphan of the Zhang family on the northern border. Hearing this name, I immediately opened my eyes wide. The Zhang family on the northern border. Is it the Zhang family guarding Guan Mountain, famous for the night weeping of 100 ghosts? Correct. Harrison nodded, his eyes solemn. I was shaken inside, beginning to clearly understand the reason why he treated concubine Lucy so specially. The Zhang family on the northern border once had the merit of protecting the country, but also the crime of losing the country. The disastrous defeat at Hengyang Mountain that year made the emperor extremely angry. Many officials responsible for military provisions and the army were executed. The entire capital was submerged in a scene of bloodshed. The Zhang family once went through many life and death battles with the Chen family, and concubine Lucy's mother was my mother's cousin. Harrison said, his voice heavy. Before she passed away, she begged me to protect the last drop of blood of the Zhang family. At that time, the war situation was chaotic. I only had the way to bring her to the estate, change her name to hide her identity. Harrison's eyes contained deep fatigue. Him telling me this story today made me a bit uneasy, though I tried to keep a calm appearance. So why are you only telling me now? I wondered, unable to hold back a retort. Harrison smiled, holding my hand. Because the battlefield is ruthless. Outside, rumors say I am an invincible god of war, but I can also be injured, even die. It could be just a stray arrow or a sword from nowhere. I will lie down with my ancestors at the northern borders. No one goes to the battlefield certain they can return. Speaking out would only make you worry more. Or because the prince found the current division of the estate between me and concubine Lucy convenient. I replied without hesitation. He didn't deny it, nodding frankly. Right, I admit that, but Vivi, I have never touched her. I stared wide-eyed in astonishment, not knowing what to say for a moment. You haven't touched her? I asked again, my voice full of surprise, not believing what I just heard. Seeing my suspicious look, Harrison spoke up to explain. Taking her as a concubine was a last resort. I had to take care of her for the Zhang family, but I originally had no intention of taking a wife or having children. Call me heartless or selfish if you want. The ancestors of the Chen family sacrificed everything at the northern borders, leaving only me alone to face that vast step. I do not want my descendants to have to shoulder the responsibility of conquering the Sangnu anymore, living in fear and exhaustion. If I can end the war in my lifetime, good. If I die, the fate of the Chen family will also stop here. Harrison's calloused fingers gently brushed over the back of my hand. I pondered for a while, then asked, "If you didn't intend to marry, why didn't you refuse when the Empress Dowager decreed the marriage?" "I couldn't refuse. I could not refuse," he replied, his dark eyes glancing at me. "To conquer the Xiongnu, I needed the Empress Dowager's support. The Emperor did not want to see the power of the Northern Army become too great. To him, the Xiongnu were also a tool to restrain the Northern Army, keeping its power from exceeding his control." Hearing this, I understood that the words that followed would become too sensitive, so I remained silent, pondering what I had just heard. I stared intently at the bed curtain. Harrison also said nothing more, just sitting quietly beside me, waiting for me to accept this truth. Only when Amber asked from outside if she should prepare the meal did I nod and sit up. But before getting out of bed, I suddenly asked, "Then what do you plan to do about concubine Lucy?" Harrison sighed. "She has also accumulated quite a bit of silver over the years. Wait a few more years. When the situation in the capital is stable, I will choose a good family for her in the northern borders, so she can live peacefully for the rest of her life." He helped me up, his eyes full of sincerity. "Vivi, I am sorry for what has passed, but we still have plenty of time ahead." I understood his meaning and only smiled faintly in response, not wanting to make things difficult anymore. After dinner, Harrison stayed in the main courtyard. While Amber helped me bathe, she asked cautiously, "Madam, what is this about?" I shook my head and ordered her, "Send a message home. Tomorrow morning I will return home for a visit." That night I felt Harrison's movements, but true to his promise, he restrained all desires until I agreed. Even so, I still couldn't sleep well. The northern borders might be temporarily peaceful, but there were still many matters to be resolved. Banquets at the estate were held continuously, and Harrison didn't have much free time. The next morning, I prepared to get into the carriage to go home when I saw Eunuch Harold bringing a carriage to the estate. "Princess Consort, the Empress Dowager invites you." Amber looked at me in surprise. I just smiled. Since returning from northern borders, it had been a long time since I paid respects to the Empress Dowager. On this occasion, I would visit her. Amber helped me into the carriage, and we left the estate, heading straight for the imperial palace. A person led a group of palace maids, holding her skirt slightly as she walked in and bowed to greet me. This servant Susan pays respects to the princess consort of the northern borders. Although surprised in my heart, I maintained a calm expression, smiling faintly. "Maid Susan, please stand up. Is there something that troubles you to come all the way here?" Susan maintained etiquette, finishing her bow before standing straight, looking at me with friendly eyes and a rustic smile. "It is nothing major. It is just that this servant heard from Eunuch Harold about the princess consort's achievements in Huiyang City and felt admiration." "Mad Susan, you are too polite. I only did small things, nothing compared to the glorious feats of the soldiers," I replied modestly. Susan smiled politely. "Princess Consort, you should not humble yourself like that. Today, the Empress Dowager even personally went into the kitchen to make the yam and date cake she knows the Princess Consort loves." I smiled lightly and bowed my head. Then truly, I am lucky today. Seeing the magnificent palace silhouette before my eyes, a heavy feeling rose in my heart, as if I were stepping into a tiger's mouth full of danger. Outside the hall, Amber was stopped. She looked at me worriedly, but I just nodded, signaling her to follow the palace maids to the side hall to rest. Susan opened the crystal curtain, leading me inside. The Empress Dowager still maintained her majestic demeanor despite her age, leaning on a soft chair, wearing a set of exquisite white clothes. Beside her were Princess Hannah and the Crown Prince, chatting happily. Upon seeing me, the Empress Dowager's eyes immediately lit up, and she quickly sat up. "Vivi. Vivi, come here quickly so I can take a good look at you." I walked quickly over, bowed in greeting, then stood beside the Empress Dowager. She kindly held my hand and patted it gently. "You have lost a lot of weight lately. The chaos in Huiyang City must have frightened you, right?" I bowed my head, my voice soft. "Yes, a little afraid, but fortunately, I had the Empress Dowager's concern. Eunuch Harold was sent to pick me up, but due to the urgent situation, couldn't return in time." The Empress Dowager smiled, her eyes becoming even more affectionate. "I understand. I once went through youth like you children and witnessed many things. Reality shows that I was not wrong in entrusting Harrison to you, and I can be at ease with Harrison's parents. The Empress Dowager praises me too much. The prince is wise and mighty. Vivian is only lucky to stand by his side, I replied modestly. The Empress Dowager looked at me, her smile deep but no less majestic. How could a truly kind person exist in the imperial palace, full of beauties with both talent and virtue? Even though she was Harrison's biological aunt, every time I met her, I couldn't help feeling unreasonably anxious. Sister Princess Consort, why are you so humble? Princess Hannah laughed softly, covering her mouth with her hand, and said, in my opinion, Brother Harrison marrying you is truly his great fortune. I tilted my head to look at her, only seeing her wink mischievously at me. Over the years, countless times late at night, I wondered if the person saving her that day hadn't been me, or if she hadn't fallen into the water. Would Harrison and I have met in a different way? But reason always reminded me that even without Princess Hannah, I would still have married Harrison, just for a different reason. As for why it was me, perhaps it wasn't because I was so wonderful, but simply because I had a father holding the position of Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince, making me the best choice. Every time I thought like this, I felt empty inside. But right now, I couldn't reveal any thoughts in front of everyone, so I could only bow my head to hide my emotions. The Empress Dowager saw this and smiled gently, pulling me to sit beside her on the soft chair. A palace maid brought up the yam and date cake I loved, inviting me to eat. Under Princess Hannah's jokes and the Crown Prince's solemn composure, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became warm and harmonious. 2 hours passed. I began to feel tired, but the Empress Dowager seemed to have no intention of stopping yet. I took a sip of tea, preparing to continue maintaining my spirits, when Susan ran in from outside to announce, Your Highness Empress Dowager, the Prince of the Northern Borders is outside the hall requesting an audience. He says that Your Highness has been chatting with the Princess Consort for a long time. Please return his wife to him soon. Speaking of this, a smile appeared in Susan's eyes. My ears immediately turned red. The Empress Dowager also turned to glance at me, her tone full of teasing. Right, let him in. Saying this as if I, an old woman, do not know propriety. In just a moment, Harrison, wearing a white jade robe and a jade crown on his head, walked in. After the formal greetings, there was another round of conversation. I felt like a child out playing who was caught and brought back because I was too engrossed in fun. Harrison gently held my hand, leading me out of the palace. We walked slowly side by side. The Crown Prince walked alongside. The two exchanged light conversation, seemingly nothing noteworthy, but in reality, every word contained deep meanings. I was no stranger to the Crown Prince. The immature child of the past had now grown up, trying to emulate the appearance of an adult. Royal etiquette naturally had very little room for innocence. A breeze blew through the cold corridor of the palace, making one feel as if the cold penetrated deep into every crack in the bones. All the furtive glances from the surrounding palace maids and guards were directed at us, as if countless people among them were monitoring every action and word. The emperor had now fallen ill. He intended to establish a new heir. Whoever sat on the throne would have to receive the support of Harrison, the person holding the military power of the Northern Army. After saying goodbye to the Crown Prince, I got into the carriage with Harrison to return to the estate. Seeing my face wasn't good, he poured a cup of warm water and placed it in my hand. What is wrong? Did the Empress Dowager make things difficult for you? He asked. I took the cup of water, warming my hands with it, looking at him deeply. Not exactly. It is just that I didn't expect the Crown Prince to be present today, I replied. He smiled, placing a thick fur blanket over my legs. After finishing work and returning to the estate without seeing you, hearing that the Empress Dowager had taken you into the palace, I immediately followed. The Crown Prince wanted to meet you. I continued. I know you shouldn't have come here, especially at this time. Harrison only laughed softly, his eyes slightly mischievous. If I didn't come, do you think you could have easily escaped from there? I shrugged and laughed softly. It would have just been a few more cups of tea and some snacks. The Empress Dowager couldn't keep me in the palace forever. He looked at me with warm eyes, as if piercing through all the anxieties in my heart, making it impossible for me to pretend anymore. I sighed and whispered. Right, indeed, it was not pleasant at all. But what else could be done? The Empress Dowager is a very formidable person. If you do not feel comfortable in the future, unless necessary, you do not need to enter the palace anymore. He spoke with a calm voice. I looked at him in surprise. The prince and princess consort of Haiyang City lived day by day amidst so many worries and obligations. Harrison laughed softly, his eyes shining with a bit of fatigue. My health hasn't been good lately, he said. The imperial physician ordered me to rest and recuperate in the estate. What do you think? I narrowed my eyes slightly, whispering, is this deceiving the emperor? He laughed, his voice gentle. Vivi, you do not need to worry. I have everything handled. My lord, are you not afraid the Empress Dowager will be angry? He shook his head, his eyes flashing with a hint of dissatisfaction. The Empress Dowager has been angry many times already, but she shouldn't drag you into this. I warned her beforehand. I clearly understood his concern and fell silent. After a long while, I opened the cabinet, took out an exquisitely carved lacquer box, divided inside into 8 small compartments containing various fruits and pastries. I didn't know what to say, so I used a small gift to express my gratitude. Throughout the long time living together, I knew his taste very well. Although he wasn't a picky eater, he had a liking for sweets. I smiled, handing the box toward him. He laughed softly and asked, "What are you doing?" I smiled and replied, "No." This was bought by Amber at one of the 8 most famous shops in the capital. Coming back in a hurry this time, I didn't have time to make anything. Later, I will prepare dishes made by my own hands for you. He laughed, reached out to take the box, and tasted it. I also ate a little along with him. The small box of treats was quickly finished. If you like it, when we return I will buy more for you, he said. Return. I looked at him in surprise, not understanding. Just then, the carriage stopped, and Amber's cheerful voice rang out from outside. "Me lord, princess consort, we have arrived at the Su estate." I looked up in surprise at the large signboard reading, Su estate, in front of me, then turned back to look at Harrison. He laughed softly, the corners of his lips curling up. "Isn't today for visiting home, my lord?" I hesitated, not knowing what to say. He got out of the carriage first, then reached his hand toward me. "Let's go. It has been a long time since you met your parents." I hesitated, but finally placed my hand in his, letting him help me out of the carriage. The news of my return reached my mother. She was overjoyed. Her radiant smile chased away the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. While chatting that evening, she kept holding my hand, talking endlessly about the concept of sweetness follows bitterness, that after suffering comes happiness. But when mentioning the matter of children, my face couldn't hide the tension. The fact that the Chen family had no heir was a great worry I couldn't shake off. After dinner, Harrison was pulled into the study by my father and brother to continue drinking. It wasn't clear what they talked about, only that when he walked out, his eyes and brows carried a smile. My mother intended to keep us overnight, but I refused. Before leaving, Harrison intentionally walked ahead to give me private space with my father. When I looked at my father, I realized his hair had added many gray strands in the few months I was away from the capital. His eyes were old, and his trembling hand seemed to want to touch my head, but then dropped midway. "It is good you are back. It is good you are back," my father whispered. My mother said my father often worked late recently. I inquired about his health. He just laughed and replied, "I am fine. Although spring has arrived, the weather still hasn't warmed up. Father, you should take more care of your health. Do not overexert yourself. Some things do not need to be clung to so stubbornly. When it is time to let go, please let go." When my mother mentioned it, her face was full of worry. I looked at my father with eyes full of concern. "Father is old. Your grandson is also nearly 10 years old. Although there are tutors, how can they teach as thoroughly as when father personally instructs him? Why not resign and return home to be happy with your children and grandchildren? Wouldn't that be better?" My words silenced my father for a long time, then he said, "Did he tell you to say that?" I shook my head. "No, this is my idea. Father, the wind has risen in the capital. It is still not too late to withdraw now. If father doesn't think for himself, you must also think for mother and the entire Xu family." My father sighed, his voice full of fatigue. "Half a lifetime stepping into the quagmire, how can one withdraw so easily? He thinks so too, doesn't he?" I looked straight into his eyes and asked firmly, "Father, I just want to ask you one question. Do you want to resign?" My father bowed his head, avoiding my gaze. A moment later, he called a maid to give me a plate of cakes and smiled, saying, "This is the cake your mother made especially for you. It is your favorite. It is late. Be careful on your way back. I entrust you to the prince. Rest assured." He didn't answer directly, but I clearly understood his meaning. My heart was bitter, and my eyes began to get wet. but because a maid was standing nearby, I had to suppress it. I knelt before my father, bowing deeply, then turned away, tears silently falling. When I walked away, Harrison was already standing in the distance, tall and silent in the wind. I timidly bowed to my father, then hurriedly walked away. Throughout the journey back, Harrison didn't ask anything. Only when the lights were out did he suddenly ask softly, "Vivi, is there anything you want to ask?" I silently turned to look at his face in the dark and asked, "Has His Majesty's mind really changed?" He didn't answer immediately. His voice rang out in the night, deep and unpredictable. His Majesty was already suspicious by nature. Now that he is ill, it is even harder to guess his thoughts. "So the prince thinks His Majesty is nurturing and fighting?" I whispered, repeating, "What does nurturing and fighting mean?" "Like putting two insects in the same box without food. Whichever one survives will be the winner. To His Majesty, perhaps the strongest winner is what matters most, not who it is." I clenched my hands, thinking carefully. His Majesty's path to the throne years ago was no different from the current situation. Harrison seemed to sense the unease in my heart. He turned, gently patted my back as if soothing a child. "Vivi, do not worry, I am here." It wasn't fear, but a feeling of helplessness choking my throat. The wind blew strongly, sweeping along the wheel of time. No one could avoid it. 3 months later, on a seemingly peaceful morning, Consort Bella's faction suddenly submitted a petition accusing the Crown Prince of 18 crimes. Among them were many crimes related to embezzlement, land disputes, and even collusion with the Xiongnu, along with many other serious crimes for which evidence was presented. The emperor was furious but still harbored doubts in his heart. He immediately ordered the Crown Prince to be imprisoned in the Palace of Eternal Spring and handed over to the Ministry of Justice for strict investigation, while asking Harrison for assistance. In just a moment, the capital was like a storm. Everyone was bewildered and worried. My father, responsible as the Crown Prince's Grand Tutor, was implicated for proper teaching, and was also imprisoned. Harrison, on one hand busy dealing with the Xiongnu situation at the border, on the other hand, had to monitor the Crown Prince's case, leaving him no time to rest. Even if he returned to the estate to eat, he only exchanged a few short words with me before falling asleep from exhaustion. With him by my side, I didn't worry about my father being mistreated in prison. But what worried me most was the dark hand behind the scenes, because those 18 crimes couldn't be prepared overnight. My mother drowned in tears every day. I stayed at home for nearly half a month, intending to bring her to the prince's estate, but she refused. "Vivi, my child, your father chose this path. I am his wife, whether good or bad, I accept it. But you are not like me, you are married. The prince is a good man, he will protect you. Absolutely do not get involved, understand?" My mother held my hand tightly, her old eyes full of sincere worry. "The prince has no children, give him one, Vivi. Do not be stubborn anymore. A son or a daughter is fine." I was speechless, my throat choked. A long while later, I forced a smile to comfort her. "Mother, do not worry too much. The prince returned to the estate and told me he found evidence proving the Crown Prince did not collude with the enemy. Just a little more time, and the truth will be brought to light. My child, do you need to lie to your mother?" I looked at her and smiled, but inside was infinite darkness. I wasn't lying to her, but could everything be resolved so easily? At night, Harrison returned to the estate looking weathered and tired. I prepared hot water and personally served him a bowl of hot noodles. Vaguely, I smelled blood on him, but he just lowered his head, sniffed, and said, "I will go bathe first," intending to step into the bathroom. But I immediately grabbed his arm. "My lord, no need to rush. The water isn't ready yet. You must be hungry, eat first." He looked at me once, then didn't refuse, sitting down to eat a large bowl of noodles, which was gone in no time. "The matter is almost done. Wanyan's mouth has been forced open. In a few days, your father will likely be released from prison. Vivi, you can rest assured. These days have been hard for you." I replied gratefully, "It is nothing. It is just that the truth was not as rumored. Investigating clearly returns innocence to the wrongly accused." Harrison paused for a moment, then continued, "It is just His Majesty's illness." "How is His Majesty's illness?" I asked hurriedly. "Didn't they say before that his condition was improving?" "The imperial physician says it is just terminal lucidity. I fear he won't live much longer, perhaps not past 2 months. My status is sensitive. When your father is released, it is best to prepare early." The words weren't spoken clearly, but I understood his meaning. It was no wonder Consort Bella and the others were so impatient they acted recklessly. They were trying to force the Crown Prince to abdicate. My father was loyal to the crown prince, so in the coming time, he needed to be more careful. But what worried me most was the emperor's mind. What was his true intention? I will go back and talk to mother, I whispered, taking the initiative to hold his hand for the first time. Sincerely thank you, my lord. I knew he didn't want to get involved in this matter, but for my sake, he didn't mind the difficulty. He was a bit surprised by my action, but in just a moment, he turned his hand to hold mine. Being a person in the court, how can one stand outside? It is just that I try not to become a pawn manipulated by others. Anyway, it is late, go rest early. Harrison stood up and went into the bathroom. When he came out, I was already lying on the bed, staring at the flower and full moon patterns carved on the headboard. My heart suddenly felt indescribably anxious. As he approached, my heartbeat seemed faster than ever. My lord, turn off the light. I tried to stay calm. He didn't notice my nervousness, blew out the lamp, and lay down. I took a deep breath, tried to stabilize myself, then slowly leaned close to him, wrapping my arms around his waist. I could feel his body stiffen, his breathing became hotter. In the darkness, my voice trembled slightly. My lord, do you want to have a child? He immediately turned over and hugged me. I closed my eyes, thinking he would take action. But instead, he stopped, gently patting my back. His voice was hoarse, carrying an unclear meaning. Vivi, I only think of the present, but this is taking advantage of you a bit. I said I would wait for you until you truly desire it. 3 days later, Harrison presented the evidence to the emperor. The crown prince was released from the Palace of Eternal Spring, and my father was also released. The temporary military command was handed over to the vice-general to manage. I couldn't help but feel guilty. Clearly, anyone could see this was due to the crown prince being implicated, and the reason he got involved in this matter was because of me. However, Harrison didn't care in the slightest. Taking this opportunity, he took me out to travel everywhere. We went everywhere, from Mount Putuo, Bixi Lake, Lam Sun Temple to every corner of the capital. From the bustling streets on Juke Avenue to the poor, lowly houses in Copper Coin Alley. We tasted exquisite dim sum from famous chefs in the city, and sometimes sat by the roadside enjoying a bowl of congee worth only 1 copper coin. I had never experienced such intimate moments with him, nor had I ever felt so happy. He could sit high up in the solemn ancestral hall, facing noble officials without needing to display authority. Yet he could also stoop down to help an old farmer who fell in the middle of the field, gentle as a simple peasant. I never thought that besides military talent, he was also proficient in farming. When he talked to the old farmer, his words were fluent and knowledgeable. Perhaps because I looked at him too intently, he suddenly turned back and smiled at me. Ending the conversation with the old farmer, he walked over and sat next to me on the edge of the field. A gentle breeze blew through his hair, wheat stalks swayed in the wind. I took a water flask borrowed from a roadside tea stall out of the basket, poured a cup of tea and gave it to him. Vivi, look, he whispered. I nodded. Yes, truly beautiful. Gold, silver, and jewels cannot compare to the green of the fields before our eyes. I reached out to touch a stalk of rice, feeling the roughness on my palm. It was these coarse grains that nourished countless lives on this land. He laughed and began telling stories about the northern borders. In the northern borders, there are no 4 seasons. When the plants are green and lush, you can see herds of cattle and sheep running and jumping on the steppe. The grass is emerald green, the sky is blue. That is the most beautiful time of the year. My parents back then were always smiling. They often took me to the steppe to ride horses, going deep into the steppe to watch herds of wild horses running, listening to the wind tearing past my ears. In the big mountains, it was also very lively. You could see wild rabbits, small deer, and wild boars jumping out from the grass. Skilled hunters entering the mountains never returned empty-handed. Back then, everyone's life was favorable. But regrettably, those good days didn't last forever. The northern borders is not a place with a mild climate. Before winter arrived, the north wind would blow, and snow as thick as goose feathers would cover the ground, making this place desolate. He paused, took a sip of tea, and then continued. The northern borders is not a suitable place for farming. When winter comes, disasters often occur. Every year, people die from hunger, thirst, and cold. The Xiongnu tribes on the steppe always come down south to plunder in the winter. Do you think they truly do killing and conquest? No. The ambition of those in power might desire that, but for the majority of them, it is simply because they cannot survive. The year I was 12, my father died in battle at the northern pass. I followed in his footsteps into the Northern Army, starting as a humble soldier. That year was very cold. I was assigned to stand guard outside the military camp. The north wind blew in my face like sharp knives. The flickering fire beside me was also cold. Standing in front, I saw only a pitch-black color, dark to a terrifying degree. I didn't know what my path was, nor did I know where the path of the northern borders lay. Could it be that the people of the northern borders have to endure this cruel and hopeless fate generation after generation? I was so cold I forgot the time. At that time, I had a big brother who was the captain of our small squad. Seeing I hadn't returned for a long time, Big Brother went out to find me, only to discover my legs were numb. Big Brother was a native of the northern borders, with an honest personality, fond of joking, but his words weren't pleasant to hear. He had joined the army for 5 years, going through life and death on the battlefield several times. There wasn't enough charcoal in the army, everyone often had to huddle together to sleep. The smell was indescribable. Speaking of this, he smiled and shook his head. At that time I was still young. In their eyes, I was just the youngest brother. In the camp, there were many youngest brothers like me. Big Brother both scolded me for being foolish and warmed my numb legs in his embrace. Every generation of Northern Army soldiers grew up through situations like that. At that time, I asked them, "Aren't you afraid of going to the battlefield?" They laughed and replied, "Afraid, but there is no other way. Who doesn't want to live peacefully? But those Xiongnu want to steal our food, want to steal our wives and children, kill our brothers. So what can we do? We only have the way to fight them. Anyway, one life for one life, killing one is enough, killing two is profitable. Vivi, look, in the northern borders, human life is just that cheap." The smile on his face faded, hinting at a bitter mockery. I choked up. As someone protected since childhood in the capital, I couldn't help but feel heartache and helplessness at the fate of people like him. Now, no matter what I said, it felt superficial and shallow. I just silently reached out and held his hand. He didn't look at me, his hazy eyes looked forward, seemingly gazing at that distant land and sky again. He continued recounting. After that, Big Brother died. In a small battle 3 days later, he was pierced through the chest by a stray arrow and died. That was the first time I went into battle. As a new recruit, we were protected very carefully by the brothers. That battle was won, but Big Brother was lost. He paused for a long time before continuing. At that time, we captured some Xiongnu prisoners. Among them was one whose age was similar to mine. I was very furious and asked him, why go to war? Why invade my country? In his eyes, a flash of naive ignorance appeared. He replied that joining the army meant getting food, having 3 buns every day. Yes, 3 buns could already buy a life. He lowered his eyes, silent for a very long time, then slowly reached out to stroke the ear of wheat in front of him, his voice full of determination. "Vivi, I want to try. Although the Xiongnu have been destroyed, the problems of the northern borders have not been thoroughly resolved. If the problem of food and clothing is not solved sooner or later, conflict will erupt again. The land in the northern borders is not suitable for growing wet rice, but I believe that on this vast land, there will be suitable crops that can nourish the northern borders. One day, the northern borders will be as prosperous as the capital." I sighed softly, speaking slowly from my throat. "It will certainly be like that." He laughed, holding my hand tightly. "With me, okay?" "Of course," I replied. After a while longer, the sun had risen high. I pulled Harrison along to a nearby villager's house to eat. We walked on the path between the fields, laughing and talking boisterously. Suddenly, ahead, angry shouts rang out, accompanied by the sound of a whip whistling through the wind. A few young masters dressed in brocade, riding on tall horses, along with a dozen fierce servants, were surrounding several old farmers. Get lost right now for this master." Several old farmers knelt down, kowtowing incessantly, begging, "Great lords, please have mercy. This rice only needs a little longer to ripen." The young master spat. "Pah! That old man over there, get lost immediately. Do not be ignorant. Quickly get out of the way for me. Do not spoil our master's fun. Let's see if you can escape." At that moment, Harrison and I had just walked closer when we saw a whip swing heavily toward the old farmer. The blow made the old man fall to the ground, groaning in pain. Harrison frowned, stepped forward quickly, raised his hand to snatch the whip before it could strike again, then jerked it back forcefully, striking back at the person riding the horse. The servant stumbled a few steps and fell flat on the ground. Before he could lift his head, cursing rang out. "Do you want to die? Do you know who we are?" Before the words finished, as soon as he lifted his head, he was immediately kicked by Harrison. Falling flat on the ground, he said coldly. It was this prince who hit you. If you are capable, come find this prince to settle the score. Hearing this, the young master sitting on the horse turned pale, hurriedly enduring the pain to crawl off the horse, kneeling prostrate on the ground along with the servants around him. Subject Havian son of the assistant minister of the Court of Judicial Review, pays respects to the prince of the northern borders. I did not know the prince was here. I put down the basket, walked over to support the old farmer still kneeling on the ground, and asked, "What happened?" The old farmer looked around hesitantly, daring not speak. I immediately said, "Do not be afraid, just speak the truth clearly. The prince of the northern borders is here, he will demand justice for you." Hearing this, the old farmer felt reassured, crying while recounting the whole story. The story wasn't complex, nor was it anything new. It was still the familiar story of children of powerful families bullying people. It was just regrettable that today they had run into Harrison. The people of the northern borders would risk their lives for a bite to eat, while here, just because of a bet, they became tools for the children of powerful families to trample on at will. I clearly saw Harrison's face darken. He gave a cold laugh, threw the whip to the ground, didn't even bother to look at them once, and ordered coldly, "Get out." The foppish young masters, seeing his face full of murderous intent, trembled in fear and immediately fled in panic. I watched their backs and asked, "Are you just letting it go like that?" Harrison replied coldly, "Of course not. If parents do not teach their children, then someone else must teach them instead." He turned back, softening his voice to comfort the old farmer. "Do not worry. This prince will definitely demand justice for you all." The next day, the entire capital was abuzz with the news that those young masters were punished by their parents with beatings and made to kneel in the ancestral hall. The one who proposed destroying the rice field even had his leg broken. Their parents also had petitions submitted to the censorate, were severely reprimanded, and some were even demoted 3 ranks and transferred to the remote border. Then, the capital, usually full of the rampant children of powerful families, suddenly became quiet. Everyone withdrew. When entering the palace to see the Empress Dowager, she also mentioned this matter, laughing endlessly when mentioning Harrison's handling of it. She said, "That child still keeps his straightforward personality like that. The prince is an upright person, that is a blessing for the country." I replied. The Empress Dowager laughed softly, but then her eyes became serious, speaking with implication. "But too straight and it breaks easily. Now is a sensitive time, it is better to be a bit stable." I was stunned for a moment, then understood and nodded in agreement. Leaving the palace, I met the crown prince. After the time of imprisonment, the crown prince seemed much more calm and mature. However, his face still revealed anxiety. I only spoke a few perfunctory sentences to him, then hurriedly left. Before stepping through the city gate, I noticed the guarding soldiers all wore solemn expressions, killing intent overflowing. Returning to the estate, I heard news transmitted from the palace that the emperor was critically ill and intended to amend his will. The wind in the capital blew stronger. At the same time, more and more people appeared around me to probe. Many wives of high-ranking officials, for various reasons, flocked to the estate. Most of them were supporters of the crown prince's faction. Since the time Harrison stood up to help the crown prince, everyone regarded him as siding with the crown prince, and those whom Harrison had just punished belonged to consort Bella's faction. My father also called Harrison over to talk many times, increasing the rumors. I naturally had no ill will toward the crown prince, but in my heart there was a faint feeling of suspicion about some conspiracy. I recounted this to Harrison. He remained silent for a long time, looking at me with complicated eyes, then simply uttered gently, "Vivi, in the end we also have to make a choice, do we not?" Although I understood, my heart was still clouded by fog that couldn't be dispelled. Harrison finally implicitly made his attitude clear. The crown prince's power at that time occupied the advantage. In addition, my father and his allies had carefully prepared attacks aimed at consort Bella and the 13th prince, which were launched one after another. It was from that moment that I truly understood that this was the imperial court. Those elegant high officials whose mouths were always full of morality and benevolence, when arguing, were no different from market traders, using schemes that were not upright at all. News that the emperor was critically ill and unable to attend to state affairs continued to be transmitted from the palace. The general guarding the western garrison, began to show unusual signs. The Empress Dowager immediately decided to assign Harrison to lead the army to suppress it. On the day he set out, I came to see him off. Under the sunlight, wearing silver armor shining brilliantly, he raised his hand to gently stroke my cheek, saying thoughtfully, "Counting it up, I have only taken off the armor for less than half a year." Speaking of this, I felt dull again and didn't want to say more. Harrison laughed, then whispered in my ear, "Vivi, wait until everything is done, we will go to the northern borders, okay?" In front of everyone, Harrison suddenly pulled me into his embrace. Laughter and chatter rang out from behind. Leaning against his chest, I clearly heard every steady heartbeat, strong like the knocking of ribs. I whispered, "Okay." The army set out. Harrison led the way on the white horse, his figure gradually disappeared into the distance. At this time, Amber approached to report, "Madam, the master invites you home for dinner tonight." I replied softly, "I know. Send someone back to report, saying I am not feeling well. I will visit father another day." I bowed my head slightly, replying softly, "I know." Amber wanted to say more, but finally only replied with a "Wes." I still didn't return to the estate. Using illness as an excuse, I stayed in the estate for several days until the Empress Dowager summoned me to the palace and kept me in a side palace to stay overnight. This was the first time I stayed overnight in the palace. Thinking back, perhaps everything had signs from before. At midnight, firelight flared up in the palace city, followed by the hurried footsteps of palace maids running back and forth in panic. I sat up from the bed, hurriedly dressed, carefully hiding the dagger in my chest pocket. The head maid, Susan, led the maids in, dragging me straight to the secret chamber of the Palace of Benevolent Peace. The Empress Dowager was still sitting calmly inside, her expression serene, even leisurely enjoying tea. Looking at her, if I hadn't known the situation beforehand, she truly deserved to be a member of the Chen family, remaining so calm amidst the chaos of soldiers. The sound of soldiers' hurried footsteps, the sound of swords slashing into flesh, the sound of begging and crying all transmitted clearly. My face was pale. The Empress Dowager still had the heart to comfort me, but in this situation all words of comfort became meaningless, like this blood-soaked painting. The night gradually passed. A knock sounded on the door of the secret chamber. Silence lasted for a moment, then suddenly the door was pushed open violently. While I was still on guard, Susan stepped forward. The arrival wore black armor, fresh blood still stained his sword. He carefully bowed, stepping aside. "Vivi, let's go." The Empress Dowager stood up, gently adjusted her slightly disheveled coat flap, and looked at me with cold eyes. I said nothing more, just silently following behind her. On the way, bodies were fallen everywhere by the roadside. Blood soaked the hem of my dress red. The closer we got to the main hall, the thicker the blood on the ground became. It could be seen that this place had been cleaned up before. The bodies had all been dragged toward the square. Among the guards, I caught a familiar face, Harvey, Harrison's subordinate. He originally had a serious face, but when he saw me, he smiled foolishly, revealing white teeth. Amidst the scene full of corpses, I couldn't force a smile, only nodding in response. If he was here, then Harrison. Perhaps while I was thinking that, I didn't know when we had arrived in front of the main hall door. The door opened immediately. Through the door, I saw Harrison standing there with a cold expression, and the Crown Prince holding a blood-stained sword. Drops of blood fell onto the cold stone floor. At the Crown Prince's feet were the bodies of the 13th Prince and consort Bella, their eyes wide open. When he saw me, Harrison's eyes showed a bit of surprise, but when looking at the Empress Dowager, he showed an expression of understanding. The palace door closed behind me. "Your Majesty." The person who was originally critically ill, at this moment, the Emperor sat on the throne as if nothing had happened, his demeanor peaceful. Not far beside him was my father. Seeing me and the Empress Dowager walk in, the Emperor suddenly burst into loud laughter, his face becoming extremely ferocious. "Good peace. Indeed it is you. I knew it. It is you." The Empress Dowager gently smoothed her sleeves, slowly stepping forward, her lips curving slightly, stepping over the body of the 13th Prince without caring, her voice calm. "Your Majesty, to preserve the throne, Your Majesty even feigned illness. Are you satisfied now? The two sons you feared most, one secretly allied with the Imperial Guards to rebel, and the other personally killed his own brother. Isn't this exactly what you wanted?" The Empress Dowager's tone was full of sarcasm. "Perhaps this is the price to be paid. My Chen family was devotedly loyal to you. Wherever you pointed, we charged into battle without ever frowning once. Yet just because of baseless suspicions, you pushed my Chen family into a death trap. The horses hadn't advanced, provisions were non-existent, eventually, they starved to death one by one. Now only Harrison remains, yet you still won't let go. If not for heaven's will, I fear he wouldn't have lived until now. The Empress Dowager's words were full of contempt, while the Emperor's eyes were red, his voice hoarse as he screamed. Loyalty. Baseless suspicions. Ha ha ha. Ask the people of Great Xia, who doesn't know the Northern Army belongs to me. But how many know that the Northern Army has actually become the private army of your Chen family? Harrison's face is worth more than my imperial decree. You dare call this loyalty? If your majesty could personally lead the army, eat and sleep with the soldiers, fight on the dangerous battlefield for days and nights, surely the result would be better than my Chen family's. Harrison smirked, a smile full of strangeness. But you only wanted to sit on the throne, hiding deep in the palace looking down on the world. We are the Emperor, the Emperor. Harrison emphasized, his face calm but hiding turbulent undercurrents. Even though I stood here, this matter was not something I could interfere in. I quietly retreated to the corner of the great hall, my eyes looking toward my father. My heart suddenly turned cold, as if falling into a bottomless abyss. In the hall, the confrontation continued. Finally, the crown prince himself forced the emperor to drink poison. Before taking his last breath, the emperor looked at the crown prince, leaving one final sentence. Tomorrow. My father stood by, coldly observing. This matter has also come to an end. My father finally spoke in a hoarse voice. Finally done. The emperor has passed away. The 13th prince plotted rebellion and has now been executed. The country cannot be without a master for a day, so we must invite the crown prince to ascend the throne. As he spoke, my father pulled out the prepared imperial decree from his sleeve. Prince, a voice rang out coldly. One who serves the king but kills his father, how can he be an example for the myriad people? Harrison was stern. The Grand Tutor forged the imperial decree, a crime of high treason. Order the arrest of the Empress Dowager back to the palace. Just finishing his sentence, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the panicked and stunned faces of the crown prince behind him. As the last voice rang out, the palace door opened. Harrison waved his hand, soldiers rushed in. The crown prince was dragged away amidst screaming resistance, but was quickly gagged. The Empress Dowager only now showed surprise, but then smiled. My father silently obeyed the order, but his face was pale, his eyes revealing clear shock, then turning to confusion, and finally cold indifference. Before leaving the door, my father looked toward me and smiled slightly, a smile so painful that I couldn't look any longer, only able to turn away, tears streaming down. 3 days later, the 4th prince ascended to the throne. The crown prince, unable to bear the humiliation, committed suicide in prison. My father, charged with forging an imperial decree, was sentenced to be beheaded in the autumn. However, due to his past merits, the family was not implicated. His descendants were demoted, stripped of all status, and forever barred from holding office. I didn't know why the 4th prince ascended the throne. In my memory, he was a gentle person who disliked conflict. But at this moment, that was no longer important. After the sentence was handed down, I begged Harrison to let me see my father one last time. He said nothing, only sending someone to take me there. This was the first time I stepped into the Ministry of Justice's prison. The light was dim, cold, and damp. In the cracks of the icy stone bricks, bloodstains that couldn't be washed away still remained. Although I was the daughter of a criminal, I was also the wife of the Prince of the Northern Borders. Before Harrison expressed a clear attitude, no one dared to treat me disrespectfully. The jailer led me to a narrow cell. I took a small pouch from my sleeve and gave it to him. Let us talk privately. The jailer licked his lips, hesitating, but finally quickly stuffed the pouch into his pocket and whispered. Princess consort, please do not take too long, so it is easy for this lowly one to work. I smiled lightly and nodded. The cell was very small with 4 square walls like a large cage weighing heavily on my chest. The gloomy, damp stone walls had only a single small hole high up, just enough for light to filter in. When I brought the food box in, my father, wearing a thin cotton coat, was bending over the stone floor, writing a few characters with water. Looking at him, I saw clearly that the people in the Ministry of Justice hadn't made things difficult for him. I walked over, put the food box down, and glanced at the characters written on the floor. Establish a heart for heaven and earth, establish a destiny for the people, open peace for 10,000 generations. Those were the things my father had always taught, and also the root of the way of being human that he always passed on to his children. You have come. My father looked up and smiled at me, a gentle smile like before. Yes, I bowed my head gently, opening the food box. Inside were a few simple dishes and a bowl of rice. Mother cooked this herself. This rice is from our hometown. She went through several streets to find it. She said, before you leave, father, you should eat home-cooked rice so you won't forget the way back later. How is your mother? Mother cried for a few days, but now she has gradually recovered. After taking care of father's funeral affairs, mother and brother will return to our hometown. Mother is a strong woman. I didn't reply, just respectfully handing the chopsticks to my father. He picked up a piece of meat, chewed slowly, his eyes squinting as if enjoying it. Who did she let sit on that throne? Suddenly, he asked the fourth prince. I replied. I also taught him. His nature is gentle, he is a likable person. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Then he quickly returned to a calm look. The prince treats you well, doesn't he? Hearing this, I couldn't help but smile sarcastically, looking up at my father. Wasn't it all part of your plan, father? The paper marriage 7 years ago, wasn't it calculated by you and the Empress Dowager beforehand? He was silent for a moment, his eyes complicated, then he whispered. You knew. Father, I am not a fool. Initially, perhaps I wasn't clear, but he was cold to me for many years, guarding against me all that time. Day after day, I endured a lonely life in the prince's estate. If I couldn't see through anything, wouldn't I be failing what you taught me? I spoke with a gentle voice. To pave the way for the crown prince, father abandoned me. When speaking of this, my heart ached. I paused for a moment, then continued. Perhaps it was due to the emperor's favor for consort Bella, or perhaps because of unintentional words from emperor, that father felt uneasy. Although the crown prince had been designated as the heir, the 13th prince, who had the support of the western garrison, didn't have strong power. There was only one person who could confront him, and that was Harrison. But he was a stubborn person, wholeheartedly concerned with the northern borders, with absolutely no intention of fighting. Even the Empress Dowager, his biological aunt, couldn't sway his heart. So father set his sights on me, to make me the soft blade breaking the armor around him. Father understood his loneliness, understood his isolation, and knew that in his heart there were pressures he couldn't share with others. So father sent me to his side. He was like a block of ice, but once warmed, the fire in his heart would be fiercer than red fire. Father wanted to use me in exchange for Harrison's undeniable support. However, things went differently from what father and the Empress Dowager expected. Perhaps father also didn't expect that between me and him, a strange relationship would be maintained. Distant yet close like that. Over the years, I wasn't a fool, and he wasn't stupid either. I laughed softly, recalling each meeting, each conversation with him. Every exchange of words was like a battle of wits, but also full of restraint. In the end, father succeeded. That is right, father succeeded, just as father wished. That is why when I returned, father appeared eager, no longer reserved like before. I sighed, a tear falling unintentionally. It took me 3 years to understand his preferences, then another 2 years to knock on the door of his heart. But perhaps there are things father will not understand, or perhaps father has forgotten. Sincerity must be exchanged for sincerity. If his heart is not moved, no one can force him, right? Although I am a bit selfish, father must admit that the prince is also an outstanding person, the best in the world. Father, my heart was moved. But father, do you think that if I hadn't made him develop feelings, how many of our family would still be alive? Father, I advised you many times. The emperor was suspicious and jealous. He regarded father as a thorn in his eye. If father had known to stop, you wouldn't have fallen into this desperate situation today. But this court still must have someone be the emperor. Why couldn't it be the crown prince? Did father do anything wrong? My father angrily slammed his chopsticks onto the porcelain plate. I stared at the piece of meat that had fallen out, closed my eyes, and smiled a pale smile. Father, do you know why the emperor increasingly feared the crown prince? Because he saw himself in the crown prince a selfish, cruel, and indifferent person like himself. Father, ask your own heart, could the crown prince truly become a wise ruler? Why couldn't he? I taught him since childhood, but when he killed his father to overthrow the emperor, did he feel any regret? An emperor needs to be decisive. But his collusion with the Xiongnu, pushing tens of thousands of people in the northern borders into misery, is that also the decisiveness of a wise ruler? I spoke angrily. My father closed his eyes. As for me, I looked straight at him with red eyes. Father, You went to the northern borders when you were young, saw the wind of the northern borders and the blood of the people there. Do you truly think that was right? What hurts me most, do you know what it is, father? It is that the father I was always proud of, the person I believed would devote his life to the people, ended up being the mastermind behind all this. My father was silent. I wiped my tears and continued. Father, I just want to ask one thing. Why did you have to do that? He closed his eyes, speaking somewhat bitterly. There are things that must be sacrificed. This dynasty needed a new beginning. After the crown prince ascended the throne, I would have guided him. But father, was that right? Today father could sacrifice me, could sacrifice the northern borders. So tomorrow, what else could father not sacrifice? Their lives are also like mine, easily destroyed. I closed my eyes, heavy tears fell. A moment later, I stood up, knelt on the ground, and bowed respectfully. I bid farewell to father. Thank you for raising me all these years. After 3 deep bows, I stood up, looking at my father with closed eyes, saying not a word. Then I turned to leave. Just as I was about to step out the door, I heard an old voice ring out from behind. Take good care of your mother, she is old. And live well with the prince, my child. Although his appearance is tough, his heart is very soft. Vivi, that your father choosing him for was not without thought for you. Yes, I replied, my voice choked. Just stepping out the door, I saw Harrison standing straight outside the prison. Done talking. I nodded, avoiding his gaze, raising my hand to wipe the tear still lingering on my cheek. Let me take you home, he said. Okay, I whispered. On the way back in the carriage, no one said a word. In the past days, I had always avoided him. Now that everything was resolved, it was time for me to face the truth. I told Amber to prepare the meal, and I ate with him in silence. After eating, I turned to him and smiled. The weather today is truly beautiful. Does the prince want to walk with me in the garden? Okay. Harrison smiled at me. Rarely did I see him smile. I reached my hand toward him, and we held hands tightly. The scenery in the garden was truly beautiful, but he and I had rarely visited it. Without servants following, we walked side by side on the path paved with blue stone. No one spoke, flowers bloomed brilliantly everywhere, the scenery truly fresh and beautiful. Suddenly, he broke the silence. I can't save your father. He didn't say the name clearly, but I understood. I shook my head slightly. No need. Thank you, my lord. One who has done wrong must pay the price. Moreover, my father may not necessarily want to live. Keeping his body intact is good enough. Harrison tightened his grip on my hand, his voice low. Vivi, do you hate me? I do not hate, it is just that I have one thing I want to beg of the prince. What is it? I stopped walking, turned to face him, looking straight into his eyes seriously. My lord, please report on my behalf that I have passed away due to illness. From now on, Vivian Zhu will no longer exist in this world. He gripped my hand tighter, silent for a long time, then said, Do you really want to leave? I bowed my head, my eyes becoming misty. Why do you want to leave? Is it because of your father's matter? Before he could finish, I interrupted. No. I shook my head, my eyes looking at him gradually becoming gentler. My lord, you understand clearly, don't you? Between us exists too much suspicion, probing, and calculation. This marriage was originally just a transaction weighing benefits and harms. That is why on the wedding day, you abandoned me in front of all the guests and left. You also understand clearly that the matter with concubine Lucy was just a play taking advantage of the situation. But you still harbored wariness towards me and used her many times to test me. He looked at me, his voice trembling slightly. That day, I didn't understand you well. This marriage came too suddenly and strangely, and your father's identity was extremely special. Before that, he had also secretly tried to rope me in. At that time, the northern border was full of chaos. I couldn't help but calculate a lot. He spoke, his voice full of earnestness. I just laughed softly. My lord, I do not blame you. Putting myself in your position, if I were you, I fear I would have done the same. You doing so, considering everything, was not entirely a bad thing for me. Your coldness at least brought me a few years of peace. But in reality, you were not wrong. My appearance originally carried a purpose, which was to use you. He was silent. I continued, but you and they are not the same. Is that really so? I do not see any difference. He paused for a moment, then continued, his eyes contracting slightly. I laughed softly and said, I am grateful for the months you treated me well. That was the happiest time in all the lonely years after marrying you. But that kindness of yours, my lord, was not without self-interest. From the beginning, you didn't want the crown prince or the 13th prince to ascend the throne. You pretended to stand outside, but step by step led everything to go according to your will. He listened silently, his eyes contemplative. Finally, you succeeded, right? You achieved your goal. But I also know clearly that I caused this with you. I am an accomplice. My voice lowered, mixed with a bit of sarcasm. He bit his lip tightly, silent. I also tried to advise him, but in the end, people are still swept into the vortex of obsession. I released his hand, retreating a few steps, creating a distance between us. He took a few steps forward but finally stopped, not advancing. Vivi, I truly love you. Everything I said to you is the truth. I know. If not, the prince wouldn't have bothered to protect my family. For this, I am very grateful to you. But in the end, I still cannot overcome myself. My lord, although I had a purpose in approaching you, honestly speaking, I am not ashamed of myself. I have never done anything to harm you, nor have I done anything to harm the people of Great Shah. As for my father, he brought his crime upon himself. As a daughter, it is inconvenient for me to say more. But clearly, you and I are not a normal couple. What has happened cannot be erased. Between us, there is still a barrier. It is better for us to part ways. That will be better for both. The prince will eventually meet a better woman, and you two will live happily for a lifetime. He looked at me, his eyes pondering in silence. Only after a long time did he speak with difficulty. Vivi, have you ever truly loved me? I didn't expect that one day I would see insecurity in his eyes. My father, in some aspect, had seen too accurately. To say I didn't love would be too contrary to my heart. My lord, how could I not love you? I said gently. Memories of innocent times suddenly surfaced. I laughed, looking up at the sky where free birds glided past. Back then at home, in my father's study, I first read the book, Pacifying the River Borders, that you wrote when you were the great general in the north. In it, there was a sentence I liked very much, and I still remember it to this day: cannot lack heart, cannot lack benefit. Vow for world peace, devote heart and strength, though death comes, no regrets, no shame in the heart. At that time, you were just a distant symbol to me. I knew you were a descendant of heroic Chen family, the only one left, and also an undefeated war god. But I didn't expect your literary talent to be so excellent, not inferior to my brother, who studied with my father since childhood. At that time, I was very curious. What kind of person was the prince, exactly? Although a woman, I was raised by my father like a man. My father and brother often discussed things in front of me, so I knew more stories than other young ladies. I also learned a lot about you from them. My brother respected you very much. Every time he mentioned you, he praised you endlessly. I became more and more curious. I laughed softly, recalling the days before I got married as the happiest time in my memory. But the first time I met you was 5 years later. At that time, you had forced the Songnu to sue for peace. You rode a warhorse, wearing silver armor, majestically entering the city. You were much better than I imagined. But when the Empress Dowager's decree arrived, I was astonished. The initial flutter of emotions was quickly extinguished when I learned that you had brought a woman back. And finally, I still had to marry you. I shook my head slightly, the smile on my lips fading. After the marriage, although I didn't say it, I still carried a bit of resentment in my heart. I continued, my eyes carrying a bit of sorrow. I didn't understand why I had to bear such a fate, so I immersed myself in books, finding ways to hide in the pages. But ironically, we were too compatible in that regard. Every time we talked, I felt like meeting a soulmate too late. Finally, I couldn't stop my heart from fluttering. My lord, it is hard to find a soulmate in life, but regrettably, we met at the wrong time. You used me to test, and I, while keeping my self-respect, couldn't let myself suffer grievance. Returning to Huyang City, I read almost all the books you left in the study. Your mind was much more interesting than I imagined. The first time I stepped out of the capital, personally experiencing the battlefield, there were things one could only understand by witnessing them with one's own eyes. The cold numbers on war reports were actually precious lives that once laughed, cried, and lived fiercely. And perhaps from that moment, I began to understand you from a different angle. Later, when the prince began to open up to me, I felt very happy. But regrettably, there is no more chance now. I curled my lips slightly, trying to force a smile, but knowing that smile was very forced. It is still not too late to start over. Over the years, I treated you cruelly. I know it well, but I still did it, he said, stepping forward to take my hand, his tone urgent. Now that everything is done, it won't be like before. Vivi, you once promised to go to the northern borders with me. I will treat you well. If you do not like staying in the estate, I will take you horse riding. watching the blue jade lake together, going to the snow mountains to see the Buddha's light. If you do not want to be in the northern borders, I will take you to Jiangnan, to anywhere you want. My lord, I will definitely go to the northern borders. I looked at him, speaking each word clearly and slowly. But just by myself. I didn't say that sentence, and the conversation had no conclusion, just ended hastily. In the following days, Harrison was by my side almost every day, using actions to try to persuade me. I no longer mentioned leaving. Everything seemed to return to before. On a cool, rainy day in late autumn, I returned with my brother, bringing my father's remains. According to his last wish, we cremated his body. My brother and mother left the capital, taking the ashes back to our hometown. Before they left, Harrison and I saw them off. I could see clearly that my mother and brother had many complicated emotions. Finally, they advised me to live well with the prince. I held Harrison's hand, smiling gently. After sending them off, on a beautiful morning, I set fire to the villa. Before that, I had arranged for Nuve the princess consort's death in the fire to spread throughout the capital. Together with Amber, I set off alone for the northern borders. I loved the scenery of the northern borders, loved the atmosphere of freedom there. Liked being able to walk on the street without worry and be myself. I knew this wouldn't escape Harrison's eyes, but it wasn't necessary. That fire was just to give an explanation to the rumors in the capital. He and I had discussed it again many times. Those small cracks appeared clearly before our eyes. Our beginning wasn't simple, and the process was even less beautiful. So how could we hope for a complete ending? Together with Amber, I stopped at a small village in the northern borders. No longer threatened by the Songnu, the faces of the people of the northern borders gradually brightened. They lived optimistically and eagerly. Under Harrison's active governance, the lives of the people here gradually flourished. I opened a small library for girls, imitating my father's way, specializing in teaching literacy to girls from difficult backgrounds. I also learned more about farming, experimenting with planting seeds I had specially brought along with the old farmers. Although I knew the land of the northern borders was arid, I was in no hurry. I had a lifetime to do this. Harrison still hadn't appeared. I once thought that perhaps I would never see him again in this life. Until one day, when I went to the market with Amber to buy vegetables at a street corner, I caught a glimpse of a figure flashing by quickly. Just one glance, and I knew who it was. Amber saw me dazed and asked, "Madam, what are you looking at?" I shook my head and said, "Nothing, let's go." From the male lead's perspective, it was a long time before I slowly stepped out from the street corner. My eyes searched the surroundings, but in the crowd, the figure I missed day and night was no longer there. I knew her sharpness, just one glance, and she must have recognized me. But in the end, she did not want to see me, so she left without a shred of attachment. Harvey stood beside me, his face showing disappointment. "The madam is gone." "Him," I replied softly, full of disappointment. "Let's go." "General, do you intend to go on like this forever?" Harvey's voice carried a hint of anger. "The general used to be strong and decisive. Why have you become so hesitant now? From Huyang City to Luha Town, even riding the fastest horse takes 3 hours. Whenever you have time, you disregard day and night to run here just to see the madam. Do you not want to meet her? The madam is here now, yet you keep hiding. What is there between husband and wife that cannot be spoken clearly? I know the madam's father was imprisoned by you. But that was because he broke the law, forging imperial decrees and colluding with the Songnu. Every crime was a capital offense. Moreover, you did your best to protect the Shu family. The madam is not an unreasonable person. If there is truly no other way, you just need to kneel and admit your fault." His voice suddenly dropped. My hand unconsciously tugged at the hem of the robe on my knee. My eyes drifted past my knee, full of hesitation. I glanced at him and shook my head slightly. "Oh heavens, my general. Your wife has already left? Why are you still thinking about dignity?" He sighed. "In the northern borders, we are not like the people of the capital. Bowing to one's wife is not losing face. If kneeling on a washboard could solve everything, why wouldn't I be willing to do it?" I laughed bitterly. "Then why?" he asked, his eyes full of confusion. "I see the madam still has feelings for you." Harvey scratched his head, his face full of questions. I bowed my head slightly and sighed. "Because she understands reason. Precisely because she understands, even knowing that I used her, she still chose to continue with me. I do not know how much pain and torment she had to endure when making that decision. Before the Empress Dowager decreed the marriage, I had heard of her reputation. Everyone in the capital knew the eldest daughter of Grand Tutor Thomas Shu. Her virtue and learning stood out among the noble ladies. Her talent was no less than that of any man. I was once curious about her. Someone at a banquet once pointed her out to me among a group of noble daughters feeding fish by the pavilion. She stood out most, not because of her splendid attire, but because of an aura of pure elegance that made it impossible for anyone to look away. She often smiled, her eyes curving like the night, blooming flowers that blossomed across the hills of the northern borders in summer, making people feel happy just looking at her. Someone once jokingly asked me, "If you had a wife like that, how would the general feel?" I laughed and replied, "Precious jade is good, but it is not the stone I need." At that time, I had just taken in a child from the Zhang family, changed her surname, and placed her in the estate to take care of her, mainly to avoid the Empress Dowager pushing for marriage and unnecessary troubles. I publicly declared I would never take a wife or concubines in this life, intending to wait a few years until the storm passed, then feign death from illness and secretly take her away. When the Xiongnu had not been destroyed and the northern borders were not yet stable, marrying would only delay someone else's youth. But events did not unfold as I wished. Sonia's identity was too special. Although I kept her in the estate, I could hide it from the world but not from the Empress Dowager. The Zhang family's case was a serious crime, and because of it, the northern borders fell into chaos, with enemies in the north watching closely. That I could keep her alive was already a leniency exceeding the law, so how could I keep her by my side forever? The fact that I did not marry or leave an heir was the Empress Dowager's concern, so a marriage was decreed for me. I did not expect the person chosen to be her. I did not think the Empress Dowager would choose her for me. At that time, the Zhang family and her family had issues, and traces of the conspiracy led straight to the Crown Prince. Grand Tutor Thomas Shu had secretly tried to rope me in, and it seemed the Empress Dowager was not the same as before. When she knelt before the Empress Dowager begging to annul the engagement, her face was pale. I intended to refuse with her, but looking into the Empress Dowager's eyes, I understood that this time, I could not say no. I needed her support to counterattack the Xiongnu, not continue to defend passively as I was. Therefore, I remained silent. At the wedding ceremony, Sonia caused a disturbance. I understood clearly what my leaving meant to her, but in the end, I decided to leave, partly out of dissatisfaction with the marriage, and partly to test her. After all, she was the daughter of Grand Tutor Thomas Shu, a talented woman famous in the capital. She might have had other calculations, but her actions surprised me. I thought she would make a scene, or even abandon the marriage and leave. Part of me perhaps expected that. After all, being treated like that by her husband on her wedding day gave her every excuse. But she didn't do that. She behaved even better than I imagined. Calm and poised in a difficult situation, maintaining her dignity. She truly lived up to being a noble lady of the capital. This made me even more wary of her. On the wedding night, I intentionally brought up the wedding ceremony and Sonia. Her sobriety and behavior continued to surprise me. Honestly, I admired her a bit. If not for this relationship, perhaps we would have become soulmates. But ultimately, I couldn't completely trust her words about just wanting to live peacefully in the main courtyard. Grand Tutor Thomas Shu had great ambition. He wanted to pull me to the Crown Prince's side. As his daughter, could she be that simple? I couldn't gamble with the fate of the northern borders. In my chest, there was still hot blood. She believed in justice and persisted in that belief. But for me, it seemed strange feelings had arisen for her, and only then did I truly realize it. But it was too late, like a boat that had set sail and could not turn back. Therefore, I was forced to stay at the northern borders, using distance and time to extinguish this flame of affection in my heart. According to reports from the spies I planted in the capital, it seemed that without me, she lived even more comfortably than before. For 6 years, I observed her, but human emotions are hard to control. I didn't know if this was a rational decision or a blind desire for affection. When she came to Huyang City under the Empress Dowager's order, I knew it was the place where I had grown up and fought for so many years. I knew she loved books, so I opened the entire study and bedroom for her to read freely, opening up to her, wishing to be closer. But clearly, she felt awkward at this approach. I understood that the distance between us needed time to heal, and I wasn't in a hurry. News of blizzards and the food crisis on the steppe caused turmoil within the Xiongnu. The conflict between Wanyan's sons also created an opportunity for me. When news of my assassination spread along with the natural disasters, Wanyan would definitely lead the army south. That was my chance to act. And in this battle of wits, she, the person I respected and loved, became a pawn in my hands. I used my feelings for her as a tool. But precisely because I understood her, I loved and hurt her more. When did I sink this deep? I wasn't clear, but I knew well that I had been too cruel to her. Yet even if time turned back, I would still do the same. On the peak of Mount Putuo, in the silent forest, there was no place to bury the souls of the fallen soldiers. In the Putuo temple, no Buddha statue could erase the sins of a killer. I forged a sword named Truth and Justice and placed it on the table for her to stab herself in the heart. I watched her suffer but could say nothing. The feelings I had for her were real, but in that moment they began to change. I won, winning completely, but the price paid was her. Go meet the madam once. Harvey was clearly unwilling to give up. He followed behind, trying to persuade me. It is fine. Seeing her living well is enough. My words stuck in my throat, my eyes never leaving the familiar figure opposite me. When did you arrive? I whispered. She stood in the light, a gentle smile on her lips, incredibly soft. My throat choked up, facing her natural demeanor. I suddenly dared not look straight into her eyes, only turning my head away. Only after a long time did a sentence without head or tail burst from my throat. Harvey, impatient beside me, boldly pushed me from behind. I stumbled a few steps, standing closer to her. She didn't avoid my gaze, stepping forward to look at me. Harvey hurriedly spoke up. Madam, last night, the general was busy until midnight, didn't even have time to drink a drop of water before rushing here.
Is that so?
She tried to speak, her voice hoarse. My heart beat fast. I cautiously glanced at her, my eyes greedily taking in every feature of her familiar face. Harvey interjected. Is that hard dry bread worth anything as a meal? In Luha town, there is a delicious noodle shop. Since we are here, why not eat something? She turned her face to Harvey, smiling gently, and said, All right. If you are not hungry, I won't force you. I thought to myself, her words were like needles pricking my heart, but I couldn't utter a word. She continued calmly and gently, Do not call me madam anymore. From now on, I am Vivian Su. Su is my mother's surname. Having said that, she turned to look at me. General, do you have time? I couldn't say anything else, only smiling in response, taking the reins and throwing them Harvey. I walked quickly ahead. She turned back, walking slowly. I followed closely behind, my heart full of nervousness. She walked in the crowd but maintained a strange quietness and peace. Perhaps the days away from the capital, away from me, had helped her refine her soul to be more complete. I thought to myself, even if it was just her back, I couldn't stop watching her. The distance between her and me was so close that I only needed to reach out to touch her, but I didn't dare, only knowing to clench my hands. My lord, she suddenly stopped, as if sensing my intense gaze. I walked closer. She continued walking without another word. Okay, I replied. Although my heart was full of desires to get closer to her, she stepped lightly, dodging skillfully. The distance between us wasn't far, nor was it near, just half an arm's length apart, yet it seemed like an abyss that couldn't be crossed. I felt bitter, and finally made no further move. Throughout the way, she said nothing, only leading me to a roadside noodle stall. A pot of water was boiling on an iron stove placed on a small wooden table. Next to it were salt, green onions, and other spices. A few old, yellowed wooden tables were set up around the stall. The owner was a middle-aged man who seemed very familiar with her. Seeing her, he greeted her enthusiastically. However, his eyes looking at me were a bit wary and probing. 2 bowls of beef noodles, one without green onions. She smiled and called out loud. All right, Miss Shu. The vendor replied happily. I didn't like eating green onions, she still remembered that. Soon, the noodles were served. The middle-aged man clearly treated her specially. Her bowl had significantly more beef than the others, and I also enjoyed this privilege. Thank you. I said words of thanks. The vendor just laughed. You are too polite, please enjoy. Perhaps seeing the questioning look in my eyes, she bowed her head and explained gently. His daughter is studying at my library. I knew she had opened a library specializing in teaching literacy to children and daughters of poor families. In the past, she was famous in the capital, admired by talented women everywhere. Teaching was not difficult for her. Many students, few teachers. I asked softly. Is it very hard? Not hard. She shook her head, smiling, her eyes radiant with joy. This is what I like to do. I never thought that one day I would witness her, a woman, opening a library. The capital was prosperous, but the atmosphere was not as open as the northern borders, where literacy was usually reserved for men. Even for daughters of noble families, learning to read was only to be more valued in marriage later. I am truly lucky. She looked around and smiled. Here, people do not oppose girls learning to read like in the capital. For example, this shop owner, he was the first to send his daughter to my library. I am very grateful for his trust. Seeing her smile, I smiled too. In the northern borders, many male soldiers had mostly experienced the battlefield. In the hardest times, sometimes 3 generations of a family were lost, leaving only lonely individuals. Women here also often shouldered responsibilities no less than men, so the view of them was different. Women of the northern borders were truly more open and strong compared to the capital. Before I finished speaking, a man in coarse clothes ran desperately from across the street, holding his head as he ran. A woman holding a rolling pin chased him angrily. Wife, wife, I was wrong. I was wrong. The miserable cries rang out, making passers-by only laugh in mockery. Few found it strange. I looked at her, seeing the corners of her mouth lift in a slight smile. Then she shook her head gently. When she turned back, our eyes met. The smile on her face gradually faded. My lord, eat quickly, or the noodles will get soggy. After eating, I want to take you somewhere. Okay, I replied. A moment later, after eating, she took 8 copper coins from the pouch at her waist, counted them carefully, and placed them on the table. Let's go, she said. I didn't know where she intended to take me, but I thought that must be the reason she met me today. Following her footsteps, I arrived at a reclaimed field outside the town. The field was divided into many very regular sections. Looking over the rows, there were no fewer than 8 different types of crops. She pointed to the field in front of us and said, My lord, these are the surviving results. Before coming to the northern borders, I specially asked my brother to help me collect many drought-resistant and cold-resistant plant varieties. Actually, I do not understand agriculture well. Reading about it in books still feels shallow. In the past 2 years, I have taken many detours and increasingly realized my limitations in this matter. Currently, the number of students is increasing, but my strength is not enough to manage everything. I know the prince has also put a lot of effort into this. Although I do not know if it helps, I hope I can contribute a little. Vivi, thank you. My voice was a bit hoarse. The better she was, the humbler I felt. Her excellence made me feel inferior. I truly knew what she was doing. She never forgot what we had said to each other. Over the past 2 years, I had stood silently watching her from afar many times. I saw her in the library, teaching children and girls to read word by word. 6-year-old children and 16 or 17-year-old girls sat in the same class. The sound of reading echoed beyond the library walls. I once saw a mischievous child. She, who was always gentle and calm, held a stick and chased him around the yard. I once saw her roll up her sleeves and go down to the fields with the farmers to work, carrying water to irrigate plants. Stumbling in the middle of the field, her hands and feet scratched. My heart ached, but I dared not step forward, fearing she didn't want to see me. I once saw her standing in the field with a sorrowful face when the crops withered. My lord, you are too polite. You are the one being polite. I laughed bitterly in my heart. My lord, have you been well lately? She sat down on the edge of the field, casually picked a wildflower, and pinned it in her hair. The yellow flower petals sparkled amidst her black hair. Her eyes looked toward the vast field ahead, her lips curving into a free and easy smile. I sat down next to her, reason forcing me to keep a distance of half an arm's length. Not very well, I replied. Although the war has subsided, the northern borders have suffered chaos for many years. Old remnants remain plentiful. The military of the northern borders has complex layers. The steppe of the Xiongnu has not yet fully integrated. Governing a region is no lighter than going to battle to kill the enemy. I am still gradually learning the trivial details and the balance of the situation. She laughed softly, her voice calm. Governing a country is like cooking a small fish. One must be slow and leisurely. Governing a region is the same. My lord, you have done very well these past 2 years. I just arrived in Luha town. In the past, this place was desolate and ruined, everywhere redolent of decay and weathering. Now the tavern has become a bustling street with tea houses and wine shops close together. Even silk shops from the south have opened branches here. The lives of the people in the town and surroundings are improving day by day. Clearly, it is thanks to your merit. Even if they do not know your face, they all realize that it is you who helped them have a better life every day. Do you know When I visited my students' homes, I even saw them setting up tablets praying for your longevity. Speaking of this, she seemed to find it very interesting, her voice hinting at a bit of playfulness. Tablets praying for longevity. I lowered my head, smiling helplessly. The people's hearts turn toward you. The people of the northern borders truly respect you. There are things that seem small like dust but actually contain the power of 1,000 caddies. She clenched her fist tight and continued. My father once said a nation is not only built by the monarch but by thousands and tens of thousands of people. One must value the people's hearts. Wherever the people's hearts turn, that place will have the ability to expand borders and maintain peace for the nation. Until now, I still see that his words were not wrong. She sighed, her voice mixed with a bit of contemplation. I shook my head slightly, giving a forced smile. A sigh. Time leaves no trace. People's hearts change easily. Previously, Grand Tutor Thomas Shu was a man of resounding reputation. He once risked his life submitting a petition against the court's pressure to protect the people of the South during the flood. He also fought for those who were wrongly accused. When clues led to him being suspected, I truly found it hard to believe. If not for careful investigation, I wouldn't have dared to believe that truth. My lord, will you change in the future? She suddenly asked me, making me freeze. Finally, I dared not give a firm promise, only shaking my head slightly. I do not know what the distant future will be like. Who dares to predict anything when people's hearts are easily discouraged? I paused, then laughed and asked back. Vivi, do you worry about this? Perhaps you can supervise me. If one day I am blighted by power, becoming greedy and cruel, you can personally end me. If you take action, I will absolutely not resist. I stared at her, seeing her bow her head to avoid my gaze. If that day truly comes, I fear there will be no need for me. People like you will fight to snatch that opportunity. Anyway, I still believe that in this world, there is still justice and righteousness. She understood my meaning and didn't want to continue the conversation, so she stood up and said, It is late. I still have to teach the afternoon class. My lord, I ask permission to leave first. She bowed in etiquette, her posture as dignified as ever. I watched her figure disappear gradually. The wind of the northern borders blew, making the hem of her dress flutter. I should have run to her side, but I didn't do it. Perhaps Harvey's words were right. I was a coward. If I truly couldn't let go, perhaps I should be braver. Every beginning is difficult. I met her once. After that day, I took time to resolve the matters in Huayang City, then decided to stay in Luha Town. It just made Harvey and the others work hard running back and forth day and night between Huayang City and Luha Town, bringing approved documents and taking others back. Whenever I had a little free time, I tried to spend it all by her side. Time passed. The whole town knew that beside the teacher named Sue at the library, there was a man who often followed closely. When someone asked, she paused for a moment, then replied, A friend. I knew she understood my heart, but I dared not reveal my intention to reconcile clearly, fearing I would scare her away. However, her attitude was very clear. She rejected me many times, both implicitly and openly, but I just pretended not to hear. For men of the northern borders chasing a wife, the first thing needed is to be shameless. But Amber's eyes looking at me became increasingly unfriendly. She even picked up a broom many times to beat me out. I knew she was still in the library. Surely there was some anger in her heart too. One day, Amber picked up the broom again, but before it could sweep down, a voice rang out from inside the room. Amber glanced at me, then hurriedly ran inside. A moment later she returned with a complicated face, handing me a small piece of paper. While pushing me out, she urged, Open it and see. On the paper were only 2 lines written in elegant handwriting. Mid-Autumn. Water Moon Festival. The Water Moon Festival is a traditional festival of the northern borders. On this day men and women dress neatly. In the evening, they go out to the street to watch lanterns. It is also the day people call Valentine's Day. Receiving the invitation, I was both nervous and expectant. The night before, I almost didn't sleep a wink. Thinking back over the years, apart from the short days in the capital, she and I had hardly ever had moments like this, the small moments of lovers. The moonlight was like a stream flowing over the ground, a layer of silver frost. I carried a peony lantern to her small courtyard half an hour early, standing there waiting, daring not knock. Until the door opened. She appeared, wearing a green outfit, her shiny black hair neatly pinned with a turquoise magnolia hairpin. In her hand was a rabbit lantern. It was clear she had applied makeup carefully. Her appearance was exquisite, beautiful like a painting that moved the heart. Waiting long. She smiled at me. Not long, I replied, my heart unable to bear her smile, wanting to turn away but unable to take my eyes off her. In my chest, the hairpin I had spent half a month meticulously carving suddenly felt hot. I thought I would give it to her later. Let's go. The lantern festival is about to start. She raised the rabbit lantern to signal. According to the water moon festival tradition, if a man has affection for a woman, he will make a lantern himself to give to her. If the woman agrees, she will accept the lantern. But she already had a lantern. I gently held out the lantern in my hand, my heart still worried, but finally presented it. She looked at the lantern, then accepted it along with the rabbit lantern in her hand, holding it in her palm. Let's go, she said. I laughed softly, joy rising in my heart. Perhaps that meant she also accepted me. Luha Town was a small town, incomparable to the liveliness of the Lantern Festival in Huyang City, but to me, just having her by my side made any place special. The whole town today hung flower lanterns. Crowds of people bustled about. Looking around, everywhere were couples supporting each other. I moved closer to her. This time, rarely, she didn't refuse. I was with her like the days in the capital, solving riddles together, throwing rings, eating the famous mutton cakes of the northern borders. Even an enthusiastic old woman tied a red thread on our wrists, saying that the knotted red thread was for couples with destiny. I looked down at the red thread and laughed softly. When the moon reached the zenith, we went to the lovers' bridge. On the bridge, young girls had tied bright red flowers everywhere. Below in the river, floating lanterns with enough colors stood out on the water, bobbing into a stream like a flowing sky full of stars. Piles of fireflies hovered in the moonlight, breathtakingly beautiful. Release a flower lantern, I smiled and asked her. She gazed intently at the river surface, her expression gentle. Okay. My hand moved slightly. The red thread tied on my wrist pulled hers, as if I were holding her hand. Suddenly, a few children about 7 or 8 years old rushed in, laughing and joking. A sharp blade accidentally cut the red thread, severing the connection between me and her. The red thread fell to the ground. My face turned pale. My heart was heavy. I looked up and saw surrounding couples also arguing. It wasn't just me. The red thread symbolized fate. A broken fate was an ominous sign. The children's parents arrived quickly, their faces changing color, hurriedly apologizing and scolding the children. Amidst the crying and apologies, she suddenly grabbed my wrist and said gently, "Let's go. Let's release the lantern." The light from the flower lanterns shimmered on the water. Each lantern drifted slowly away. Around us, everyone closed their eyes to pray. A strange feeling rose in my heart. I tried to smile and asked her, "Aren't you praying?" She turned back, smiling gently at me, her eyes containing something deep I couldn't understand. "I have nothing to pray for." "Really?" I asked again. "Really?" She raised her hand. The broken red thread seemed to remind of something. Just as the red thread is broken, the moon will also set. There are things one must look forward to. The riverbank was still bustling, filled with happy laughter everywhere, but the atmosphere around me suddenly became silent. I looked at her intently. My expression seemed to freeze, my voice becoming hoarse. "Vivi." She no longer looked at me, shifting her gaze to the sky where the bright moon cut across my words. Her face tilted, her expression very gentle, her voice also soft. "My lord, I know your heart, but since leaving the capital, I no longer think of a future with you," she continued. "I read books with my brother since childhood. Frankly speaking, if I were a man, I certainly wouldn't be inferior to you at all. But just because I bear the identity of a daughter, my world has been bound by rituals since birth. While men can freely roam between heaven and earth, I can only travel through pages of books. Although I have many ambitions in my heart, I cannot realize them. I once thought my life would be like that forever until I came to the northern borders." She looked at me, her eyes filled with gentleness and determination. "My lord, here I feel free. I do not want to return to the 4 narrow walls of the capital. Vivi, no one will force you to go back. I love you. Let us start over. I won't bind you. If you want to open a library, just open a library. If you want to travel the mountains and rivers, just travel. You can do everything you want. These past few days, I felt that you still have feelings for me, right?" I continued to affirm, "That is true. But my lord, you also understand that we cannot, right? Otherwise, why haven't you dared to meet me for the past 2 years?" She replied sharply, leaving me unable to say anything more. "Correct. Because I was too clear-headed and sober, I only dared to hide in the dark like a mole, watching silently. Even looking one more time became a luxury." I bowed my head, my hands clenching my sides. Perhaps because my heart was still unwilling, I gritted my teeth and asked the final question. Vivi, is there really no possibility anymore? She lowered her eyes, avoiding my gaze. Sometimes, not saying a refusal is also a refusal. She handed the peony lantern to me. Thank you, my lord, for being by my side today. Vivian was very happy. I hope you take care of your health. Vivian bids farewell. Saying this, she bowed as before, then the rabbit lantern left her hand, gliding past the crowd. I gripped the peony lantern in my hand, standing amidst couples full of happiness, looking up at the moon high above. My heart felt hollowed out, each beat painful. You reap what you sow. The hairpin I had meticulously carved for half a month could never be pinned on her hair. The high moon shines on the past and present. That mid-autumn years ago, she knelt down begging not to marry, and now, she only wished me to take care. In the end, only I remained for a lifetime, looking at the moon like the lake water, silent forever. I am Harvey. Since the Water Moon Festival, the general began to show strange signs. He often locked himself away. After the Water Moon Festival, the general seemed to have changed completely. He buried himself in work at the northern borders, so busy his feet didn't touch the ground. Previously, he occasionally stopped by the madam's place, but now he hardly went there anymore, as if trying to avoid something. Even so, sometimes he was still caught sneaking in a corner, silently watching the madam. I didn't know what exactly happened. Clearly, before leaving, the general was very happy, even asking me for half a day what clothes to wear. But I, a rough fellow, how could I understand the eyes of young ladies? I only thought the general was naturally handsome. Whatever he wore looked good. His unusual actions made me unable to help but feel sorry. In my heart, I vaguely felt something was wrong between the general and the madam. I asked once, but he remained silent and didn't answer. The Chen family, a loyal clan, now only had the general left, and he had sacrificed too much for the northern borders. The general's feelings for the madam were clear in his eyes, but what bothered me most was that both loved each other, yet couldn't be together. Having no other way, I had to find Madame Valerie to ask, thinking that as a woman, perhaps it would be easier for her to speak. After hearing me recount the story, she just remained silent, thinking for a very long time before leaving. She left behind a cryptic sentence. Pain does not become noble and worthy of forgiveness just because it has a reason. I heard it but didn't understand clearly. Later, the general learned of this sentence. He pondered for a long while. That night, he looked up at the moon, then drank until he was drunk all night. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.